Good evening, Commissioners, everyone in attendance tonight, staff. Welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. It is February 23. We have two items officially on our agenda, and afterwards we will have a study session specific to 20 Dittos Lane. Just welcome everyone here. We welcome your attendance. We encourage your participation. Just a couple of housekeeping is that reminder that you do need to silence any of your electronic devices. And all the documents that we have before us are also available for your perusal, and they should be available in the lobby. And if you do plan on speaking on any of the items tonight, I do ask that you submit a speaker card. It should be located in the back of the chamber benches. We do need these for our official records. And when you do get up to the podium, we'll be asking you for your name and your address. Other than that, we'll go ahead and begin. And can we get roll call?
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Here.
Commissioner Ogle? Here. Commissioner Talasfor?
Here.
Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Vice Chair Jensen?
Here.
Chair Sayoc?
Here.
And Commissioner O'Donnell has an excused absence.
Okay. And Commissioner Talasfor, will you lead us in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd be happy to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item of business, we have minutes from our last meeting that took place on February 9. If there are any questions, comments, or if not, a motion for approval. Commissioner Bourgeois.
I move to approve the minutes of February 9th as is.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Jensen?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion passes 6-0. Written communications, we have 3. We have desk items for items 1, 2, and a study session. If you need additional time before each of those items we get to, just give me a quick signal. Otherwise, I'll just assume you guys can peruse it throughout the meeting. Requested continuances, we have none, and we are now at subcommittee reports. Each of the commissioners here also serve on at least one subcommittee. There are 3 that we participate in, and we use this as an opportunity to update each other on what took place within those committees. I believe Historic Preservation met, and Mr. Erickson, would you provide us an update?
Be happy to, Chair Sayoc. The Historic Preservation Committee met this afternoon, actually, and considered 3 items for action and 1 kind of informational item. The first one was an architectural site application to do some modifications to a pre-1941 residence in the Almond Grove Historic District, which the committee unanimously approved, which actually was an unusual example of where they actually reduced the size of the property to propose to reduce the size of the structure to bring it back to its original. As opposed, that's more typically one would be dealing with an addition to a residence. So the committee enthusiastically passed that. The second was at 216 University Avenue, which is in the University Edelin Historic District, which was a proposed modification to windows, and that was also tastefully and carefully done by both the owner of the property and the contractor who's involved with the design and build. That was also approved. There was a third item, which is a modification of a deck on the back side of a property at 15.5 North Santa Cruz for a restaurant that's in that. That is actually, they're trying to comply with a conditional use permit for their use, and there's some question about whether how the condition of the use permit and the conflict that is with what they've been asked to do, and whether they can do that and maintain the historical character of the building. So that was continued, and with a request for staff to kind of clear up some of the potential conflict between that. The other was just an informational item for someone on University Avenue about whether or not it was possible to demolish a pre-1941 residence. It was informational.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Any questions for him? Okay. We are now at verbal communications. This is an opportunity for those in the public to speak about any item that is not on our agenda. So as I mentioned, we have 2 and we have a study session, but if you'd like to speak on anything else that does not concern those items, you may do so now. I don't have any cards for that, so seeing no one jumping up, I'll go ahead and move to our public hearings. Our very first one is located at 267 Jared Lane. It is Architecture and Site Application S-10-035 with negative declaration ND-11-001. Ms. Bailey, do we have a staff presentation on that?
Yes, we do. Ms. Mosley will do that.
Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. You do have a desk item on this, and please let me know if you need additional time to review that. And please excuse my throat is a little scratchy tonight. I apologize. The project site is located at the end of Jared Lane, which is located at the southern end of Vista Del Monte. The subject property was created by a 3-lot subdivision in the early 1990s. The subdivision created the subject parcel in addition to the currently vacant parcel at 248 Jared Lane, and in addition to the existing property at 258 Jared Lane. Staff has received several proposed designs for the property over the years as the property has changed ownership. The current proposal is the most consistent with town policies and standards. The 2.6-acre property is zoned HR1 with an average slope of approximately 47%. Other than the existing driveway and turnaround, the property is undeveloped. The property is almost entirely covered with oak woodland, with the exception of the existing driveway and some patches of land surrounding the driveway. The proposed residence and pool will be located predominantly within the existing driveway turnaround to reduce the impacts to these native trees. The project was reviewed by the town's consulting architect, arborist, and environmental consultant. Their reports are included in your staff report. Excuse me. A mitigated negative declaration was prepared for the project due to the slopes of the site and the potential impact to the oak woodland habitat. No significant impacts are associated with the project. The majority of the property exceeds 30% slopes and consequently is a difficult site to develop. The application includes a 4,397 square foot, 2-story single-family residence with a 938 square foot attached garage. The proposal complies with the maximum allowable floor area for the property of 6,400 square feet, which would include garage area. The proposed residence excuse me, would be built into the existing slope, and much of the first floor would be partially below grade, but not quite enough to be considered cellar. The maximum height of the proposed residence is 24 feet 8 inches, with an overall stepped height of 34 feet 10 inches. The proposed project complies with the hillside development standards and guidelines, with the exception of small areas of development outside the LRDA and several areas of cut and fill over those allowed within the guidelines. While the majority of the development is within the LRDA, the house is constrained on all sides, and there are small portions that extend beyond. The LRDA represents a very small, fairly narrow area of the lot, and these encroachments are minimal. Only about 100 square feet are located just beyond the existing paved driveway and turnaround. In addition, the primary reason for exceeding the cut depths allowed is to lower the house into the site and step it down the slope as directed within the hillside development standards and guidelines. Since the house is located over the existing turnaround, the relatively flat pad must be cut to step the lower level of the house into the site. The development plans show 3 areas of fill over those allowed within the hillside development standards and guidelines. These are located at the front entry, the edge of the required fire turnaround, and for a small portion of the proposed patio. The largest area of fill was proposed for the designed second-story front entry, and the revisions of the front entry included in your desk item have removed all the proposed fill in this area, which would make it no longer an exception to the guidelines. Other than these exceptions, the project is compliant with the hillside development standards and guidelines. In staff's opinion, the house is located in the most appropriate location on the site, and these exceptions are justified by the overall project design. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the architecture and site application subject to the attached conditions, with the inclusion of the landscape screening condition provided in your desk item and the supplemental development plans included as Exhibit 12. This concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Commissioners, any question of Ms. Mosley? Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. I had a quick question. I had a little trouble reading one of the site plans, so I just want to confirm that I'm reading it correctly, and that's as it pertains to the LRDA. And since our hillside development standards and guidelines prohibit building pools on slopes greater than 30%, I just wanted to make sure that the LRDA does extend beyond the limits of where they're showing that pool being developed. I think it was sheet A1.2, and the shading was a little confusing as to to me where the LRDA was. So if you could just confirm that for me.
The location of the pool is going to change slightly in that the arborist recommendations still need to be incorporated into where that wall of the pool is. Let me get to your sheet first. And the applicant can speak better to it specifically, but it does look like it does encroach just slightly, but the location of the pool may change.
If I could follow up on that,
Yes, please.
could you elaborate on how the pool arrangement might change and where it might move, or is that a better question for the applicant?
I think the applicant should speak to it, but the primarily the rear wall of the pool, and then as it comes around that corner there of the pool is supposed to shift in order to provide the adequate setback from the tree as required by the arborist.
Any other questions for Ms. Mosley? Okay. Well, then I will now call the applicant to come up. I don't have a card for the applicant. Ms. Mosley, do you know if the applicant is here? Yeah. If you could fill this out afterwards, and if you could just state your name and address for the record before you begin.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Sloan. I'm the project architect. My office is in Campbell, 307 Orchard City Drive. The changes that we made to the entryway and some other documents, I'd like to pass. I have 7 copies, and I'd like to pass these out for you right now. Can I also get the overhead projector revved up? Is that possible? So, this is a very unique site. All the easy sites have been developed around here in Santa Clara Valley. I'm pretty sure of that. This lot. The reason why we're here right now is because this lot has a neighborhood that is near the R1 10,000, as well as this neighborhood is in the HR, and this house is coming in because it's, quote, the largest house in the neighborhood. If we were able to reach out a little bit farther into the hillsides, we could grab a hold of several houses on South Kennedy and Isabel Court that are, over 6,000 and 7,000 square feet. What I want to show you is, is this working now? Okay. Okay. So up here, there's the LRDA is in the dark green. And most of that LRDA is there because the driveway and road that was cut in as part of the subdivision created a flatter 20% area. There is a large LRD area up at the very top of the hill that is to the left of the house here in this picture. That's where all the other proposals attempted to put their projects in and failed, because it causes severe grading. It's very difficult to get up to that height with the driveway. So I did something kind of crazy, which is I decided to site the house right on top of the existing road and use the turnaround as the backyard. Oh, excellent. So here's the driveway approach coming up. This large area right here, I wanted to use this for the turnaround space. Up here is where the existing driveway terminates, and this is where I put the backyard and the swimming pool. And then I laid the house right in on the existing roadway here. This area up here is up on top of the hill, and getting a house up here is it's almost impossible without grading severely and really damaging the site. So that's the one reason we put the house in that location. Excuse me. I have another 1 minute left. This photo shows the darker trees are the trees that we're going to remain, that will always remain and help screen the project. The lighter colored trees there are also planning on remaining, although they were identified by the arborist as unhealthy and potentially an impact, getting impacted. But we're trying to keep those trees. 30 seconds. The massing of the house, we didn't do any grading of pads or anything. The house, there's very little grading. We decided the house right into the ground. The existing grade remains around the whole perimeter of the house, giving it the feel of growing right out of the ground. Utilizing the existing driveway reduces the overall impact of the project, and I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sloan. Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Sloan? Okay. So, Mr. Sloan, we have one speaker card, and afterwards you'll have 3 minutes afterwards to rebut to any issues that may have been raised during that time. Okay? And the next speaker is Alan Rudolph.
Hi, I'm Alan Rudolph, 258 Gerard Lane. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the tardiness of the desk item. As a former commissioner, I know it was very difficult to have to try and internalize the information that's contained in these documents in a very short time. Pretty obviously, since I lived next door to this site, I was always kind of hoping that the building would be up higher on the ridgeline. However, this plan, I think, is pretty well done. I think it's been designed with the hillside residential standards in mind. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the letter that I prepared, but one of my primary issues is privacy. And I'm not quite sure on this overhead that I just saw, but it seemed to me that the pad for turnaround might be extended all the way to the property line. I'm hoping that's not the case. I didn't notice that on the plans before. But what I was looking at relative to privacy, the staff report talks about how privacy shouldn't be such a big issue. But I think part of that may come from the Scotch broom that has not been cleared that's between the proposed site and my site. About a year ago, the applicant, or the agent of the applicant, cleared much of the Scotch broom, but there is a whole row of it left right by the boundary of my property. And so that partially screens the house. As Scotch prune, it's a weed, it's probably going to be eradicated, and that's going to really reveal the house in much greater detail. Possible mitigation would be extra planting of trees, and on the plan I saw that, and I think that's considerate. One thing I certainly don't want to see is some kind of a privacy wall built right along the line. I think that'd be worse than even having the house seen in the distance. But what I would like to suggest is that the house be moved about 30 feet across the pad. So that's where the pool is. So you just saw that. I was up there and I just walked along it, and it's about 30 feet there. If the house were moved there, and then the pool were put up at a higher level, which would still be essentially a backyard, I think that would take care of just about all the privacy issues, because the house would be removed back behind some of the trees. So that's one possible solution. A couple of other concerns I have that I don't know if you had a chance to read through is that the easement that grants access to that parcel is contingent upon several conditions. One is that the developer not use my property to base his equipment and park and things like that. We've already had problems with that. And so there are people, do I only have oh, man, okay. So it's in here, but I really want to try to keep that from taking place. The other major issue is at the very end of the letter, we're at an elevation at my house where we do not get adequate water pressure. And so I'm pretty sure the Milligans and the applicant don't know about that. And so what they're going to have to do is locate some kind of a water storage tank and pump facility up there. I would imagine they would do that up high, at a higher level so that they have a gravity feed when the power cuts off. As a kid, when our power cut off, our toilet didn't work. And so, you know, mostly that is just confusion on the part of kids, but it's a reality for that site. And so
Mr. Rudolph,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but your time is...
I should have looked at my time. Sorry.
No problem. Let me see if there's any questions before you step. Any questions of Mr. Rudolph? Commissioner Jensen.
I actually have a question just to make sure that I believe I understand where your house is relative to the plan, but I just want to make sure that I do. So I don't know if this
I can complain
sheet
out to you.
is still up there, so you can put it on the
I
overhead.
think the architect took it. I can come and show you.
Okay. I don't necessarily want you to do that, but if we can get one up on the overhead, I just want you to point out where your house is located vis-a-vis this sheet that we were looking at.
The house is located right about there.
Okay.
So this structure, proposed structure, is just about as close as it could possibly be to my
Could you
structure.
grab your microphone with you?
Okay.
Just so it'll be on the record? Thanks.
And
Yeah. My house is located right about here. And so what I'm seeing now that I didn't see in the plan before is this section as being additional turnaround. If this house moves over here and takes up where the pool space is, and say the pool is put over in this area, then you wouldn't have to get so close here nor take out so many trees, I don't think.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Commissioner
I
Ogles.
just, I don't quite understand where the easement is. Can you point that out on the map there?
The easement follows the road. So there's an easement up here, and the kind of problem that we've had already is this is a big turnaround area, and to develop this area up here is going to be difficult when they bring up bulldozers and things like that, or to build a pool with maybe some kind of a gunite rig and then cement mixers and things. And so what we've had already is people parking in a turnaround area here. And so this is an emergency turnaround area, and that's what I'm writing about in the letter. There's another really important issue I didn't get a chance to mention. My water line crosses under the road. And so I would really hope that the application be conditioned for immediate repair of that. Now, that's in this easement protection, but I'd hope the town would also put it in there. And so it's in kind of an odd development, but down at the lower part of the road, water line crosses over, and I'm afraid that some of this heavy equipment moving up the easement is going to damage that water line. I think there's a good potential for that. And then what's probably going to happen is contractors are going to want to park along this road and then in this area, and we're trying to keep that from happening. You know, if it's on his territory, his property, it's great. That's what he's supposed to do. But I think it's probably going to extend down into our property. And so then we're going to have a bunch of vehicles all over our property, essentially facilitating the construction of this structure. Yeah.
Commissioner Telesfor?
Thank you. You keep talking about vehicles on your property. Would you mind with a pencil or your finger, just, you show your house as being close to the left corner
Yes.
right, of their property. Can you show us where the rest of your property is? I'm not understanding that part. Is it open space property? Do you have a fence around it?
The property consists of about 5 acres. So my house happens to be right here. Then there's about maybe 2 acres down this way, then maybe about 3 acres on this side. And so it's a big parcel. This parcel's here, and now I can understand why they want to put the house here, and design-wise it's a good idea. But always before, the idea was to have it up here. That's when the subdivision was made. And I realized perhaps the constraints for building up there are too much. But I would hope that this house can be moved over a little bit so that we can have a little bit better privacy.
Well, privacy, and then you were concerned about the equipment. So if
Yeah.
if most of your requests in your letter could be met, would you object to this home?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last
If
part.
most of the points that you made in your letter and your presentation were met or mitigated,
Well, they should be, I hope.
okay, so then you wouldn't have an objection.
Yeah, if the house is moved over 30 feet, I think probably most things are taken care of, with the only concern about damage to the road and the water lines and things like that.
So you know that your water line now is in one piece?
Yeah, it's working right now. I'm not trying to set it up to get a free repair.
Thank you.
But it's a long water line, and I'm really, really worried that heavy equipment going over the road is going to damage it. And so there's other documentation at the back of this letter that talks about that. And so I just hope that the town would condition the applicant to repair any damage made to the water line and to the road, and try and keep the vehicles off the territory.
Any other questions? Actually, I do have a question of you,
Sure.
Mr. Rudolph. You've mentioned several times that you'd like the design to be moved 30 feet so that the turnaround would also be moved. So is your concern with privacy more of the cars utilizing that turnaround, so that maybe the lights from the cars?
That's part of it. The Scotch room that I told you is still remaining. Oops. Stop. Yeah, there's the parcel map. But the Scotch room that is still remaining is right about here. And I think that's probably going to be pulled out. Then we're going to have like headlights right in our house and things like that all the time. So if instead of having the pool here, the house comes over this way, the pool's put up higher, then this turnaround area can be moved over some more, and it makes less of an intrusion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We actually have one more speaker for this item. It's Anna Jean Anderson.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I work at EMQ Families First. It is the parcel, hard to kind of tell on this map. So it's 499 Loma Alta, which also goes up Phillips. So we go Loma Alta to Spreckles. I'm trying to find it on the map. Oh, here. So Loma Alta. We're right in this vicinity here. We also go around the backside of Spreckles. We have gates that open up between the Vista del Mar Street and that go over here to Jared. On the back of Jared, on this side right here, we have a back gate where we have our maintenance vehicles. Our water line also comes from there. Today it's a fenced, a gated type fenced area, and up above is where we have a cottage of 20 kids. We're very concerned about the structure as it resides today and the privacy issue. As stated prior to me, that road is very, very narrow. Not sure how all those trucks are going to get up there without damage to that road, let alone turn a cement truck around. I went up there yesterday and viewed the structure as is because it's standing, Has that is the structure that's standing there the way that it's going to be built, or has that been modified?
The story poles represent the proposed structure.
The proposed structure, because there's the big peak that's in the back looks right down onto the kids' campus, and I'm very concerned with what can be seen from there. And the whole road and the privacy and the parking, you know, I understand that there's really no way down. Once you're up, there's no way down. It took me, I have a small little SUV, it took me 4 times just to get my vehicle to be able to turn around. So, you know, I'm very concerned about the road, I'm very concerned about the noise, the parking, and the privacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any question of Ms. Anderson? Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Sloan, if I could have you come back. You have 3 minutes for any closing statements you'd like to make, and if you'd want to address some of the issues you heard.
Okay, let's see. Privacy was the first concern that I heard, and I can assure everybody there that we're going to replant trees and mitigate our privacy, or my client's privacy up there is going to be, I'm sure, just as important as yours. And, you know, if you can see up to their house, we can see across to some other house. So I'm sure that they bought this parcel for the privacy, so the end result is we're going to want to do that. And we'll work with everyone locating the trees in the right places so that everybody's comfortable. That can be easily a condition of approval. Regarding the water pressure, typically when you have a pressure at the bottom and you're going to take your water up to the top, the head pressure has to increase to make the sprinklers work. We're not going to get this house approved unless we prove that we have enough water pressure, and that can be mitigated with pumps and water tanks to get that to work. With the area that's left at the top of the hill, we may need to work out some locations for water tanks up at the top. We have no plans to putting privacy walls at the property line. I just want to make that clear. The construction of this house is going to be very difficult. Just siting the house to meet the hillside requirements was tough enough. I did originally try to put the house up top. It's virtually impossible. And we want to be good neighbors. We're probably not even going to be able to park construction crew on the driveway at all or up at our site for quite a while. We have not yet worked out a scheme, but I think what we're going to do is end up parking down below, and the guys are going to have to walk up or sort of carpool up to the top to do work on this house. It's not that unusual to have to do this sort of a thing. I also want to point out that thanks to Google Earth, you can look down and I can see how the general layout of Mr. Rudolph's site, and it appears to me as though there's an accessory structure that may be a garage that is actually buffering the view straight up the hill towards the house. I'm sure that there are, glimpses and things like that of the orange, but
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sloan. It looks like you have some questions. Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what do you think about Mr. Rudolph's idea of shifting the house kind of up the knoll a little bit toward where the pool is?
Well, part of the problem is, one of the first things that I try to work out is the fire truck turnaround. The other people tried to work out a fire truck turnaround at the top, where there actually is a turnaround now, but that's not large enough. And by the time you extend out to create a T, you're 10 to 12 feet off the ground because you can only have a 5% slope. The fire truck turnaround went in, and then simply the house went right next to it because that was the only adjacent flat area. But I've also got a garage. I've got to pull my car in, right? So that we can't all of a sudden move the house up the hill because then you got to move the garage with it. I suppose we could design a house with a detached garage and then park your car, and then this house has an elevator because they're moving in. They want to have their disabled mother come live with them. Breaking the house into many pieces and pods was never really part of the program. So I didn't explore the idea of creating sort of a village, breaking the house into pieces so that I could move it farther up the hill. But as a cohesive unit, this works out pretty well right now. I don't know if that answers your question, but I went through several. This is a very difficult site. I tried many things and tried to make sense of this whole thing. The only thing that I found that seems to work was putting the turnaround and the backup area for cars in that flat area that is available where we have it today. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Actually, I do have one. I'm concerned about the staging. You mentioned that one of the options is parking down below.
Yes.
Could you clarify where down below is?
Well, we would on Vista Del Monte, or perhaps on the I don't think there's any area to pull over to the side at the lower end of Jared Lane. It's just a very narrow private road, or almost like a driveway. So I think the staging of cars and trucks and things, we're not going to be able to stack them all the way up the hill. I think we're going to probably have to keep everything down at the bottom for safety.
Okay, and my last question, there was a question that Commissioner Bourgeois had actually asked of staff regarding your swimming pool.
Yes.
Is any portion of it located outside of the LRDA?
Yeah, it's yes. At the back of the pool, the idea was to have the back of the pool resemble a naturally landscaped cliff, if you will. There's talk of having an artificial waterfall spilling into the pool from this steeper cliff at the back of the pool. And so where the bulk of the pool is in the flat area, as the turnaround up there is generally flat, but as we lower it down, it cuts into the bank of the hill, and that's where we get that little area that's has steeper grade. I also want to note that
Actually, before you move, so I appreciate the aesthetics of it, but it sounds like, yes, there are portions that will be outside of the LRDA?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bourgeois and then Commissioner Telesfor.
Sorry, if I could just follow up with that. And could you discuss the changes that are required based on the arborist report? You know, which wall is moving in which direction?
In the arborist report, it's mentioning, let's see, I might be able to I show you the tree, the exact tree. And we've moved completely away from that, so that's not being impacted. It's this tree right here. This tree is what I call it's a beautiful tree. It's one of the most beautiful trees there, and we want to keep it. It's what I call the head of broccoli versus the stick in the ground, which many of these oak trees are just purely like a branch that comes out of the ground. This is monumental, and we intend to retain it. This is where the swimming pool is right here. And You can see the drip line slightly over the pool. The pool probably will be, when we first submitted the project, before the pool changed, the pool was cutting into this area a lot farther. It's been slid out, and it's mostly all on the flat area. There's a small little ridge, right along here is where there's an existing bank that's really steep at the edge of the driveway. You used to be able to drive up there, you better not anymore. This is where I was talking about at the back of the pool, it's going to have like the waterfall effect spilling in.
Real quick, Commissioner Telspar, Ms. Mosley has an issue to discuss.
The tree that Babby was actually talking about mitigating is the lighter green one up towards the upper corner of the pool.
This one?
And so the requirement is the wall in closer proximity to that tree be moved back to meet the required setback.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Commissioner Telspar, do you have a comment or a question?
I just have two questions. One is, it's getting back to this, the equipment trucks, and you said that you would suggest that the workers park down below and then carpool up. But how does that address cement trucks, delivery trucks of, materials coming up the road?
Well, they'll have to come up, obviously one at a time. We don't want people coming in freewheeling. This is going to be quite a job for our general contractor to organize this, and the neighbor's turnaround is prominent. It's when you drive up this long driveway, you see it, you're compelled to want to use it. But we're going to have to tell people not to use that. So we're planning on building the pool first, and I've talked to the general contractor about needing to get this pool permit issued even before the building permit's issued. Because we have to start at the top of the hill. We'll have no access to dig a pool once we start digging the foundation for the house. So this is going to be a very complex, staged project. Okay. And I don't have all the answers of how things are going to be scheduled yet, but definitely that has to be done.
Okay, thank you. Then the other question is, the adjacent neighbor suggested moving the home 30 feet to the, is that west, north? I'm not sure which area, but so, and you're saying to us that that's not possible to do.
Yeah, so the fire truck turnaround has to be a certain distance to within the house. Okay. If we moved up 30 feet, that takes us from the lower, if I'm remembering my numbers from I designed this almost a year ago, so from the lower flat area where we have our driveway now, or our garage entrance right here, to the upper little pad out the back here, the little patio, is 30 feet. So I think what he's suggesting is that we move the house up to the turnaround, the existing turnaround at the top, at the end of Jared Lane. Okay. In this location here.
All right.
If I did that, where would I put the garage? That's why I said we have to keep the garage down below, because we have to be able to back out the garage. We can't. The driveway right here is 23% slope, 24% slope. It wouldn't work for a driveway. We have to get rid of it.
All right. Thank you. That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
Commissioner Jensen.
Quick question. Has there been any consideration given to not having a pool?
Not much. I'm not sure if we design this, if we design the pool to keep this tree here, that the pool will get a little smaller. But that space would then just become a concrete deck or something of that sort. The space.
Or you could move the house over to it.
No, I'm telling you, we can't. To move the house that direction is moving it straight up a steep hill. When we start moving the house again, what do we do with the garage? The house has to have a garage. When you move the garage up back onto a steep hill, then you can't drive in and out of it. I don't know.
Thank you for your response.
Yeah.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions?
Just a question, is there a possibility of reducing the mass of the house? If there's a question about 30 feet, is there a possibility of reducing mass one way or another to accommodate that? The garage, does it, I don't know, is it a 4-car garage? Does it have to be that large?
It is a 3-car garage, 2 cars and many bicycles, I think. But that's not the nature of the problem. The nature of the problem is that it's a very constrained site. The only area that we can use for a turnaround, because if we go up to the end of Jared Lane, in this location right here, it's a very small little pad to put a house. We would also have to bring up to that pad the fire truck turnaround. There's too much impact for that area. So what we did is we slid it down the hill, the house down the hill a little farther, and this is where the garage is, and this is where the fire truck turnaround is. So this large flat area that is required for the emergency vehicles to come in and turn around, back up, and leave, and stage in case of an emergency, isn't really in the only place that I could find to make it work. Again, there were 3 other projects that put the fire truck turnaround up here. They completely destroyed. They just ripped apart the hill here and graded thousands of yards. The fire truck turnaround was 12 feet off the ground because it sailed in both directions off the ground. You can see it. I've seen that application.
Just one dumb question. I'm new to the Planning Commission.
That's okay.
So when I went up to look at it and I came up to the sort of where it was tied off with police tape and everything, what corner of the building was I looking at? Could you just point to where I was looking when I saw the story poles?
Well, you were seeing this building here. This is when you, yeah.
Or was I?
Probably this corner. Yeah.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions? Okay, Mr. Sloan, thank you. I will close the public testimony at this point. And let's see if there's any questions first of staff. Okay. I actually have 2 for you. The first is with regard to staging. If you could just remind me the process. Once the design is approved, who ensures that the equipment and the parking and the crew doesn't encroach on the neighbor's property, and that where they do end up parking is an appropriate staging area?
I'm going to let engineering respond to that.
It depends on what stage in the process they're at. If they're during the grading permit, then the Parks and Public Works inspector would be managing that. And then as soon as building takes over, foundations are poured, the building inspector would be managing that.
So before any work is actually done, is there a plan that is reviewed to make sure that it would be feasible?
In many projects, through the grading permit process, we have required a construction management plan. That's not currently in the conditions of approval, but we could ask that to be added so that we go through and really identify exactly how they're going to do this and make sure that they're not impacting the adjacent neighbors.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Jensen.
I just wanted to follow up on that. Mr. Sloan was talking about parking down below and just being in the middle of a construction zone down the block from a construction. I can imagine if I lived on Vista Del Monte, I would not want those trucks parked in front of my house. So I consider them to be impacted as well, even though they're not here. How would you protect the houses on Vista Del Monte?
Well, that's a good question. It probably would depend on exactly, I mean, we want to sit down with the general contractor and find out exactly what they're talking about. Are we talking a truck or two, or are we talking 10, 20 trucks? And I think we probably don't have those answers right now. And if we do add this construction management plan to the conditions of approval, then that's sitting down with the general contractor, really understanding how they're going to do this job. And if they have to find off-site parking and carpool up, that'd be something that we would incorporate with that plan.
Commissioner Telesport?
As a follow-up, I would imagine that also would include workers, cars, et cetera,
Correct.
that are not trucks.
Correct.
So that you would look at the whole. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well then, since there are no questions, I'd like to hear any thoughts on the subject. Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I'll get us started. First of all, this is an unbelievably beautiful site. It's just breathtaking up there. And so I understand the immense constraints of this site. Walking the site, very difficult to develop something on this site. And to use Mr. Sloan's words, he called it a very constrained site with a very small little pad. And I would agree with both of those assessments. And I think both of those perhaps point to maybe something a little smaller up there. We're being asked to make some exceptions to our hillside standards and guidelines. And so I want to read one of our standards. And on our hillside standards and guidelines, standards are not negotiable. Guidelines are. Guidelines are what we would like for you to do. Standards are the bare minimum. One of them says, due to topographic constraints, not every lot will be able to accommodate a pool or sports court. Swimming pools and sports courts are prohibited on slopes greater than 30%. So right there, you know, I know you edge into that 30% slope zone, so we have a concern. Secondly, to make an exception to the LRDA, which again is quite small on this lot, we have to make 4 findings. And development outside of this area shall be prohibited unless all of the 4 following conditions exist. One of them is that the rest of the project is clearly in compliance. Well, it's not. We have excessive cuts and fills outside of the LRDA, so I can't make that finding. Development outside the LRDA results in minimal grading, tree removal, and our changes to the natural landscape. Again, there's a lot of tree impacts because of this. I think perhaps eliminating the pool, a little bit smaller house, moving it up, and trying to keep it inside the LRDA would be a project that would be a little bit more compatible with the site. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Commissioner Jensen.
I agree with Commissioner Bourgeois, and he's quite an expert on our hillside standards and guidelines. So I think what he has to say bears a lot of consideration. I agree regarding the pool and the hills, and I also agree that it's a beautiful site. I have real trouble imagining how a cement truck or a lumber truck is going to get up there. I'm sure people are very creative, but I can't imagine them carrying the cement up to the top of the hill, and that's a tiny little street. So if Commissioner Bourgeois were amenable to considering turning his comments into a motion, I might consider seconding it.
So I will move to remand this back to staff for redesign with the guidance to remove the pool and reduce the bulk and mass to keep the project within the LRDA as much as possible. If at that point it is still not possible and there are, we see that efforts have been made, substantial efforts have been made to comply with the hillside standards and guidelines, and it's still not possible even with a smaller house and no pool, then so be it. But to my mind, it's not quite there yet. So that's my motion.
And I'll second.
Are there any comments or questions to the maker of the motion or the seconder? I actually do. I'm looking at the mitigated neg deck on page 17, the construction impacts, and it says that assuming approximately 3 trucks could be filled per hour, and I'm assuming that would be on a standard road, the 100 truckloads or 200 truck trips would occur over 10 work days, which is 2 weeks. And I know it's not normally required, but when this comes back, I would like some thought, whether it's a preliminary draft or just an outline of what a construction management plan would look like. I'm very concerned of realistically how it would occur without impacting the adjacent neighbor as well as those down the street on Vista Del Monte. So I'm wondering if the maker of the motion and the seconder would be amenable to that.
I'm not sure that that necessarily needs to be part of the motion, but guidance given to the applicant of what we'd like to see when it comes back.
Yes.
And that's fine with me.
Okay. So any other commissioners would like to share anything? Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bourgeois to remand with a second by Commissioner Johnson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. So the motion passes 6-0. Oh, I'm sorry, it's continued. Do we want to indicate a date certain?
If we could ask the applicant when he thinks they might be able to get revised plans to the
Okay,
plan.
I'll open the public testimony to ask the applicant, Mr. Sloan. Do you have a timetable when you think you could provide a revised draft? Okay, staff, assuming the next hearing will be tight, March 9.
Well, we couldn't do it until March 23rd because the March 9th hearing is full. But I'm just concerned that depending on the scope of changes, we might have to send it back to the architectural consultant, the arborist, and all that.
Okay.
We could put it on that agenda, March 23rd, and if we need to continue it again, we can do that.
Mr. Sloan, is that amenable to you? March 23rd? March 9 is completely packed. Okay. Commissioner Bourgeois, do you want to make another motion for the date?
So I'll move to continue this to a date certain, and that date would be March 23rd.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, we are now at item number 2. Item number 2 is located at 104 to 112 Town Terrace. It involves architecture site application S-09-070, subdivision application M-10-004, and conditional use permit application U-10-012. And Ms. Mosley, I assume you'll be doing this for us again?
Yes, I will. The subject site contains a 9,766 square foot parcel located approximately 60 feet east of University Avenue on the south side of Town Terrace. The property is surrounded by residential properties, including single and two-family residential to the south and west, and high-density multifamily residential to the east and north. In 2008, the Planning Commission considered an application to rezone the original property known as 506 University Avenue, which included the now separate corner lot, which is 100 Town Terrace, in addition to the subject site. The original proposal included a general plan amendment from high-density residential to medium-density residential, a rezoning from RM 1220 to R1D, a 3-lot subdivision application to accommodate 3 detached single-family residences, and a variance application to not meet the minimum lot area requirement of 5,000 square feet for the R1D zone. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the zone change and general plan amendment and approved the variance and subdivision applications pending Town Council's approval of the rezoning and general plan amendment. But the Town Council was not supportive of the applications due to the loss of potential housing units. The Town Council determined that the loss of 1 or 2 additional housing units are significant due to the limited amount of remaining underdeveloped multifamily zoned land within the town. The Council did approve rezoning the corner lot to R1D while retaining the subject site as RM 1220. The variance and subdivision application approvals were therefore invalid. A revised subdivision application to separate the corner R1D property from the remaining multifamily zoned parcel and an architecture and site application to relocate the historic house to Front Town Terrace was approved by the Development Review Committee in July of 2008. The current applicant, originally submitted plans for a 4-unit attached condominium development with 4 single-car garages and a shared driveway, but the project was designed with the single-family setbacks for the RM zone, not the multifamily attached setbacks, and it was determined that with the increased setbacks required, a 4-unit project would be difficult to accommodate on the site without several variance requests. The applicant worked with staff to create the current design, which includes 3 detached single-family condominiums ranging in size from 1,245 square feet to 1,657 square feet. The proposed design meets all zoning requirements provided the required findings can be made to exceed the maximum FAR. The proposed project would not create the largest multifamily property or multifamily development, nor would any of the single-family units be considered the largest within the immediate neighborhood. The proposed FAR of 0.43 is similar to the multifamily properties in the vicinity, which range from 0.41 to 0.81. The application was reviewed by the town's consulting arborist, and his report is provided in your staff report. The project will require the removal of nearly all the trees on the site, but as established by the consulting arborist, the trees, with the exception of the small redwood tree near the front of the property, the trees being removed are in poor health and have a low suitability for retention. The consulting architect also reviewed the plans. He reviewed them twice, and both reports are included with the staff report. The development plans provided to you have addressed the development plans that are provided to you in your staff report do address the recommendations listed within the consultant's second report. Although the consulting architect believes mass is a concern, staff finds that the massing is consistent with the neighborhood when considering the context of the existing multifamily structures to the east and the north of the property. While the massing could possibly be improved by reducing the square footage of the units, the reduction would most likely result in 2-bedroom units instead of 3-bedroom units. The high-density multifamily residential units to the east typically have 1 or 2 bedrooms, and the single-family homes to the west typically have a minimum of 3 bedrooms. The Planning Commission will need to evaluate how the proposed development provides a transition between the single-family residential to the high-density residential in terms of mass and FAR. This completes staff's report.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. I see a question from Commissioner Jensen.
This may, I don't know how complicated the question I'm going to ask you is going to be, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. On pages 4 and 5 of our staff report, there is some discussion of the differing requirements for open space and setbacks and parking for multifamily versus single family. And I just want to understand exactly what those are. And I'm wondering, well, I want to understand what those are, and I want to understand why, well, I don't want to say why it's better, but why doesn't it make sense to just attach the 3 units? I just don't get the different setback things, and it seems like you'd have more open space, less massing, and less lot coverage if you just put them together. So I just want to understand the setback requirements.
The setbacks for single-family detached on the RM zone are 8-foot side yards. The side yard setback is the primary setback that's impacted by the differentiation between multifamily attached and single-family. When you do the multifamily attached, it increases from anywhere from 10 feet to, depending on what rooms, the code gets specific about what rooms are on that wall facing that side yard, it can go all the way up to, I believe, 20 feet. So those are the main impact in regards to the side yard, in regards to the setback increases. For multifamily attached, they could possibly propose a 3-unit attached that all face on the front. You'd have basically a townhouse design. We didn't really study that. The 4-unit design was fairly attractive, but again, it would have required many variance requests. It wouldn't provided the parking that was anywhere near the parking that was required. And so staff did sit down with the applicant on several occasions trying to, go around in circles on this project and how to meet the density that council wanted, in addition to providing something that wasn't going to require the Planning Commission to make variance findings. I don't know if I answered your question. Do you want me to get into open space or?
No, you kind of did. Why wasn't the 3-unit attached studied? Is that because the developer didn't want to do that?
Developer it just wasn't studied. I couldn't answer that. The applicant may be able to.
Any other questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Actually, Commissioner Jensen started down the road that I was going to go, and I guess I have an even more basic question is, do we have a definition of a condominium? And we're starting to see some new housing types come before us with small lot single family and detached condominiums, and what's the difference between the two, and does it matter for this zoning?
The condominium just defines the type of subdivision, that it's not the land that's being subdivided, it's the air. We don't have a definition that defines the type of development for condominium within the town code.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Actually, it does make sense for me now. It looks like a single-family home, but it's not, because the land itself will not be bought. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. The land itself will not be divided.
Okay.
It'll basically be owned by all three property owners, in that they will own the air rights, and then the CC&Rs that will be tied to the development will define where the yard space for each of those units starts and ends.
Okay. And so because of that, I guess the guidance that we're using is as a multifamily, not as a single am I confusing things now? We're looking at like the setbacks as an example. It's what we would have applied to a single family detached home or as a multifamily?
Correct. So the town code defines what a single family or two family is, in that it's only one unit detached from any other structure.
Let me pitch in here. The setbacks that they're proposing is for a single family development. This is a very unique proposal. We've only had one under like this in the town, so we're following the precedents from that application, how that was treated. That was treated to meet the open space requirements for a single family residence, as well as the setbacks for a single family residence, because the setbacks for a multifamily development is much larger, and it would be very difficult for this site to meet those setbacks without getting variances.
Okay. And just one more thing. But by making it a multifamily, we're actually meeting the zoning code as...
In terms of density, you're meeting the zoning code.
Okay, okay. Commissioner Bourgeois.
And just one final thing for clarification. The residential design guidelines that we have adopted are for single and two-family residences, so they're not applicable per se to this application. Is that true?
We did use the residential design guidelines. We are defining this as single-family detached. The only thing that's making them somewhat multifamily is to some degree, the condo element. They could do these as rentals, and that would throw that condo subdivision out. But we did define them as single-family detached. There's just more than one of them on the lot.
So they were analyzed using those residential design guidelines?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Jensen.
I'm sorry, now I'm going to go to the open space. So by calling them condos, you can say we have multifamily, but we're using all of the guidelines and definitions for single family, and we're not requiring the open space we require for multifamily. So these people are like two-time losers. If you want to look at it in one way, I mean, they're getting a condo, but they're being defined as a single family, but they're not getting the open space of a condo, and they're not getting the parking of a condo.
They're not getting the community open space as a condo. There may be ways, if that was something that you felt applied to this property, that they could find some way of meeting that. I think you'd have to look at the the requirement for that open space.
Well, I'm just looking at page
they-
4 of the staff report,
But they do
where
have
it
more
says open
than,
space.
they do have much more than the required private open space. The open space requirements in regards to condos in the town code really refers to multifamily condominiums that have very limited open space, and so that community open space is integral usually. The way that this is designed, it really wouldn't serve much of a purpose.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open public testimony. I believe Mark DiMattei, am I saying that correctly, is the applicant, the owner?
Thank you. I'm Mark DiMattei. I'm the owner of this property. My address is 610 University Avenue in Los Gatos. I've been working closely with staff to come up with this proposal for this zoning, which, as we've talked about, the council's adopted something where they want to see a high-density project. I had a detached project design because for me, that's what I prefer. I've been working closely with staff, with my architect, with a few of the neighbors to come up with the project that we have in front of us. And if me or myself or my architect can answer any of your specific questions, we'd be happy to do so.
Commissioner Jensen.
Why not 3 attached condos?
I prefer to have a detached project. I think it's more private for the homeowners. It's more desirable from a saleability standpoint. If we attach them, everybody, for only 3 houses, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me to attach the units. I think we've got plenty of private space. Each house has its own yard. Everybody has their own driveway. It's just something I was hoping not to have to do to create a attached project and have that type of mass and bulk all in one spot. So it's my preference to have a detached project.
Any other questions? Commissioner Telesford?
So are you saying that if you designed a 3-car condo, parcel here, that you wouldn't have as much open space, or you wouldn't have yards for the condos?
So what I'm actually saying is that if I designed an attached product, that the people who live within the complex wouldn't have as much privacy, and the people that live around the project wouldn't have as much privacy. So if you take a look at the site plan and see how this project actually lays out, I think it makes a lot of sense. We studied several, as Marnie said, we studied several different options, from a 4-unit attached, pull a unit out, a 3-unit attached. If I were to go through these layers with you, you would see that this is the project that makes the most sense on this site. And for the few neighbors that I've been talking to, I think that they would agree they'd rather see this type of a project than an attached project. As far as the way the site is defined, we've condoized the land, so there is open space, airspace, still defined as a condo because we're not allowed to separate these as lots, as I understand it. So we've condoized the land, but we're building single detached units on this space. So that's...
And you're also building units behind each other, which is rather odd.
There's one unit that sits front and center, which has its own direct driveway. Then there's one unit to the right, which has its own driveway that will face Town Terrace. And then there's one unit to the left that has its own driveway.
But they're behind the one in the front. I mean, for me, it's a very odd design as far as site is concerned.
I think for someone who were to be buying one of these, they'd probably prefer this rather than a row house with an attached project. I'm not sure if 3 in a row could even fit on this site without doing some sort of creative. It's like we've heard tonight on other proposals, this is a tight site. It's a high-density site. So we're meeting what the council is asking for. If you read back on the history, you'll find that they started with 2. And 2 wasn't okay, so we tried 4. That didn't work really well, so now I have 3. So
I don't have any more questions at the moment.
Commissioner Ogle.
I just have a follow-up question on that, because when I look at the site, it seems to me that there's very little space between the two houses behind and the one in front. And what was your thinking about privacy and sort of views from those rear houses towards the front?
We've designed the houses so that the back two units do not have windows that look out into the front. Can we get this project up on the board? Is that possible? So you can see from the rendering that we have up on the wall here that this unit on the right, this unit right here, you would drive straight in this driveway right into your unit, and your front door is right here. So the whole behind the house thing, it's kind of common to see flag lots. This is similar to that, but we do have the unit facing the street, and it does the same on the left-hand side. Once you pass this one window that you're seeing on this elevation right here, the rest of that wall is blank, so it will not be looking into the backyard of the unit in the front. We also have some yard space, private space for this occupant out here in front, where we have this little private courtyard area. And then the two units at the back have full-size backyards with the 25-foot rear setback being met. So did I answer any of your questions?
I see a nod, so I'm assuming yes.
Thank you.
Just ask, is the same true for the second floor? That's the part I don't really quite understand how that's laid out for those two back units.
Is the same true for the second floor, being what?
They're not looking directly into the second floor of the house in front of them.
Well, we've tried to do the best we can with arranging windows and things so that we get privacy, but if you take a look at the nature of what we're building here, it's not going to be real private. It's a multifamily project, but we have taken into consideration window placement.
Commissioner Telesford?
Do you have an elevation of the back two units as they face the front unit?
I'll have my architect come up, Rick Hartman, and kind of help me out with this here.
If you look at sheet A4, that provides better.
I saw that, but I wanted to see the actual front.
So the north elevation of the rear units.
I see it.
So we're talking about north elevation of the rear units? North elevation of the rear units?
I see that.
Okay.
So you're
See how we've kept some blank wall and try to...
Well, you do have windows there in the one on the left.
There's a fence between the windows and the blank wall. The fence is the divider between public and private space.
Why am I holding the microphone for you?
Because that's your job.
If you could just quickly identify yourself.
I'm Rick Hartman with Home Tech Architecture. I'm the architect for the project.
Okay. Do you want to say that again to me?
I'm Rick Hartman.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Hartman, no.
I'm not sure who I am either.
Could you talk about the fence? You were saying that there's a...
Yes, we have fences, and you can see them on the site plan. They're drawn in pretty well. The fence is to create a backyard for the front unit and maintain privacy, but not having windows look into that same space from the rear units. And so I put the fences in there to make sure you see that happening, right? And even on the second floor, there's one bedroom window in the corner of the room. I don't want it front and center. I want it in the corner of the room to get my fire escape egress. And that's off in the corner, so it's not going to be that visual for that second story.
Can you show that to me up on your elevation so I'm perfectly clear about what you're talking about? Since we have it up, that's
this.
Great tool.
See that line right there? That's a fence.
Yeah.
Windows are on one side, no windows on the other. That's the backyard for the front unit. Same over on this side, there's a window, and then there's a line right next to it that's the fence. So I've created a private backyard, even though there's units there. And to get back, why in the world are they detached? It's all about the setbacks. Because I lose huge amounts of land to the side yard setback requirements if it's a single block building. And that was the big driving force, other than he loves detached. But the simple fact is that, as Marnie said, the setbacks are single-family setbacks, but it's an RM zone, so now I have a hybrid. I have RM zoning where there is no FAR, only lot coverage, and I have detached, so we use single-family guidelines, which come with an FAR, and now I have this funny hybrid mix. But if I mix it, wouldn't I mix it in the corner of the RM zone where I got single-family on two sides and I got multifamily on two sides? This would be the place to mix it, if we mix it. It looks like single-family sort of, but it's really multifamily. Does that make sense?
Commissioner Bourgeois, I saw you with the question.
I've got several. I'd like to change gears a little bit here. And,
Okay.
so if people still have follow-ups on this issue, I'll defer.
Are there any follow-ups on this specific issue? Okay, let's go
Okay.
ahead and change gears.
My first question is kind of a bigger picture question. I feel like implicit in the council direction for keeping this as high density was the desire for affordable housing in town. I appreciate the creativity in providing a housing opportunity that's a little bit different than exists elsewhere. But we were sold something similar on another project site that was zoned RM 1220, and we ended up with small lot single-family homes that sold for over $2 million. So not entry-level housing, which is what I think the intent here was. So my question is there a price point difference between these attached versus detached units, and does that play into your decision-making?
There won't be a price point difference, but I think there'll be a desirability difference and a quality of life difference to live in a project or a 3-unit project like this rather than something attached. So when you have opportunity to buy something in town or in any town for that matter, it's desirability that makes you stay and either decide to buy or move on and look for something else. So I wanted to do all I could to increase desirability, so we had a project that would actually sell, which is kind of a novel concept these days. So I put a lot of thought into that, and I've done this before, as most of you know, and I think that based on my experience, I've taken everything into consideration that my buyers have told me in the past, and I've tried to incorporate it into the project that you have in front of you. So desirability-wise, I think it will sell nicely. I think it'll live nicely, and I don't see that there's going to be a price difference if I were to attach it versus detach it. Homeowners get real freaked out, excuse my expression, about having an attached home. They share roofs, they share common walls, they're noisy, their neighbors are playing their drums, and this is a nice way for an entry-level buyer to step out of the box, so to speak, and get into something that's maybe transitional for them. They could feel like they're in their own single little family custom home, but not pay the price of it, specifically in Los Gatos, to try to get into something like this. And I think you understand where I'm going with this.
Thank you. And if I may, one other question, again, shifting gears since your architect's up here. I'd be curious, you've got this is obviously a transition from single family into multifamily, and you've got two very different properties on either side of you. So could you maybe just describe kind of architecturally what you're trying to do with that transition?
You want to take that one?
You notice the colors are all different and the materials are all different on all three. So if I had a single building, it's all common materials and colors throughout. So I'm trying to take it even a step further. It's single family detached, but they're similar in character but different in finish as well, which is more of a single family product looking. So I'm kind of mixing the RM with the single family just in the solution here at all. But in doing a single block building, the setbacks are so large, I honestly couldn't get the parking to work because all the parking has to be inside the setback area. And that lost so much building with the additional side yards, I couldn't get 3 to work. I'd be back to 2, which was already denied. So as everybody says, shrink it, shrink it, shrink it, well, I'm going to go back to 2, but I have to be at least 3, and we know 4 didn't work. So I'm kind of like, okay, we're going to do 3. Do you follow this?
Yeah, I was mainly thinking architectural issues with that question, so, thank you.
The architectural thing that I was trying to achieve here was the Craftsman Feeling project, which I think is nice for this town. We have kind of the Monterey-style Mediterranean restoration project I did next door, which was very successful. So when you go right next door, before this project gets built, you see these apartments that are just right there. So I felt that the way we articulated the project and the way I've kept it on the site, and then mixed the materials with the shingles, the board and bat siding, and the stucco, that was my goal and my vision, was to get a arts and crafts looking building. I think that the people will like that style, and I think we've mixed it up nicely so that each home have its own individuality, and it could be someone's special place to live. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, Commissioner Telesfor?
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, were you finished? Yeah. So you just mentioned that you had a apartment complex on one side of you to the left, and then a single-story family house to the right, and you put this in. But I'm seeing here that your height is at least 6 feet higher than the single-family house.
Yeah, we are two.
And also the two-story to the left, which is a two-story, is also somewhat smaller in height.
We've kept the roof pitches low. I've kept the ceiling heights on the first floor at 9 feet and the second floor at 8 feet. This project, this Craftsman style by design, does allow a low pitch roof, which is a 4 and 12, I believe. The site does sit up a little bit, as you know. It's sitting probably
Yes, it does.
Yeah, the street, right. So it's two-story, and it's below the height limit for this zoning. So your question about how it's a little higher than the site next door, I don't know how they accomplished that. That site might be dug down or something, but this is 9 on the first floor, I believe, right, Rick? Yeah. And 8 on the second floor. So.
And these are all 3 bedrooms, correct?
I'm sorry?
These are all 3 bedrooms?
There's 3 bedrooms, one like little den office and two real bedrooms.
Okay, one more question, and then we actually do have a speaker that would like to talk on this, so why don't we go ahead and ask that, and then we'll open it to
hopefully a quick answer to my question. I believe that I think it's for your architect. Mr. Hartman, you've said a couple times that you don't have enough land to basically attach these units, and I think you're speaking to a 4-unit, 3-bedroom condo development. If you did a 3-unit, 2-bedroom condo development, would you have the same problem?
Well, it's the setbacks change immediately from an 8-foot to a 10 at a minimum up to, we figured out like 16 feet side yard if there's a bedroom. One?
The answer is 20.
Up to 20? The lot's not big enough to have 20-foot side yards. I mean, we're talking side yards.
I'll ask the staff my question.
Yes.
Okay.
But yes, we did explore that stuff.
Commissioner Jensen, I'm going to go ahead and, unless you wanted to ask staff now? Okay. We do have one speaker card. It's Lois Morrison Keffer.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Lois Morrison Keffer. I live at 504 University Avenue, just south of the property that's being developed, adjacent right next to it. So this impacts my family quite a bit. I was here 2 years ago when this property was being looked at by Dennis Lowry. We did approve of his plan to put 2 additional homes along with the original home at that time. The Planning Commission, as Marnie said earlier, did approve that. And then the Town Council voted it down. They did not want to change the multiple housing zoning. That was the reason, is my understanding. Anyway, when we bought our house 12 years ago, it was not disclosed to us that this property was multiple housing zoned. We have single houses across the street in both directions for several houses. Behind us is a single-family house. Next to us is a single-family house. We were quite surprised when we learned that this is a multiple housing zoned parcel, and we weren't very happy about it. Our concerns about developing this property have to do with privacy and with noise. We're raising our family here, and we've addressed these issues with Mr. DiMattei. He met with us a few days ago, and we talked about how to change the windows in units 1 and 3, which will be next to our yard, so that we will have privacy. We will have privacy, and also the bedrooms will be private from us looking up from our yard. We like his plan. We approve his plan. If the property has to be developed, we think he will do a good job. He seems to be sensitive to the neighbors. He did a nice job with the Sunset House that's on the corner, and the people who live there now are happy with the house. His plan lets the zoning of multiple housing stay, which was the main issue with the council 2 years ago. We really do not want a condominium block. I think that would be ugly. I also think it is more desirable for whoever purchases these homes to have them detached. As Mr. DiMattei was saying, when you share walls, you share roofs. There are other issues that come up. I think he's done a tasteful design that allows them to be detached. He showed us the plan for the trees and the shrubs, the fences. I think he's sensitive to what people need, and we would support this development. I think it's a very tricky piece of property because of the size and because of the zoning. That's what we ran into before. There's not a simple, easy answer because of the unique nature of this property.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Thank you for speaking. Okay, Mr. DiMattei and Mr. Hartman, you have 3 minutes to say anything else you'd like to say to us, or you can waive that.
What I have to say is I hope you like my project and you unanimously approve it.
Okay, so I'm closing the public testimony. Start off with any questions of staff before we begin with deliberations. Okay, seeing no questions, anyone want to kick off the discussion? Okay, Commissioner, unless I'd be willing to start if you'd like to go for it.
No, I'll start. When we first heard this, I was, I think, a dissenting vote on the commission for keeping this as high-density housing, having served on the General Plan Committee for a number of years, and we worked closely with our affordable housing guidelines and our need for high-density housing in this town. I felt it was important to keep as many units in this zone as possible, and it seemed like a natural place to transition, have some thoughtful architecture to transition from that single-family neighborhood into the multifamily neighborhood. And I really appreciate the creative thinking on this because it does seem to, I'm hesitant, and I feel some hesitancy up here because it's not what we're used to seeing. But I don't think we should be confined by what we're used to seeing. I think there's probably a place for some new and creative types of housing, and the way I look at it now, I'm generally inclined to approving it hesitantly. I think the soft approval that we got as a recommendation from staff is about where I am right now, but I'd love to hear the thoughts of my fellow commissioners on this.
Commissioner Erickson.
I won't bore everyone with repeating everything that Commissioner Bourgeois just said because I would ditto what he said with one kind of addition to it. It seems to me that the town does need to incentivize this kind of creative thinking about housing. We had another project which we sent back that also tries to develop, encourages us to develop some more creative thinking in order to create affordable housing in the community, which the way I would think about it includes more than just low-income housing. There are other kinds of affordable housing that need to be developed in the town. So I would be inclined to support this because it's a creative thing, but with a public statement that I think the town and the town council and the planning staff need to help us think about how to memorialize this kind of thinking and these kind of opportunities formally into the guidelines of the town so that we don't have to struggle with whether we have the authority to approve these things, and we could be giving hard approvals rather than soft approvals.
Any other comments? Commissioner Ogle?
Yes, I'd just like to endorse what Commissioner Bourgeois said. We did spend quite a bit of time at the General Planning Committee talking about this particular area and the need for multifamily housing in that area as a transition. And like him, it's not exactly perhaps what we had in mind. We were thinking more of maybe lower income housing when we talked about that. But I do think it's a pretty unique approach to this. So I would be inclined to agree with a soft approval on this.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing no other comments, anyone would like to put a motion out on the floor? Commissioner Bourgeois.
All right. I am going to recommend approval of subdivision application M-10-004, conditional use permit 0-10-012, and architecture and site application 09-070. And I can make the findings that this project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15301 and 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act as adopted by the town, and that can be found in Exhibit 2. That I find that the required findings to deny a subdivision pursuant to the State Subdivision Map Act cannot be made. For the Subdivision Map Act, we have to, it's kind of backwards, we have to make findings to deny. So I find that I cannot make those, and I can make the required findings as required by Section 2920.190 for the Town Code, granting approval of the conditional use permit, as well as Section 2940-071 for the Town Code for granting an approval to exceed the maximum FAR. And this is based on evidence that was presented tonight and in our staff report and guidance from Town Council that we were looking for high density, or RM 1220 high density housing in this area. And I can make the required considerations as required in Section 2920.150 of the Town Code for granting approval of the architecture and site application, and that this project is in compliance with the single and two-family residential design guidelines. I can approve subdivision application M-10004 and conditional use permit 10-012 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3 of our staff report, and architecture and site application subject to the attached conditions in Exhibit 3 and the development plans in Exhibit 7. So basically a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Bourgeois. Do I have a second? Commissioner Erickson.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, so it passes with 5-1 with Commissioner Johnson. Why am I blanking? Saying no. Okay, and are there appeal rights?
Yes, there are. This decision is appealable to Town Council. There is a 10-day appeal period. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, real quick, because I know there are many people here who are here for the study session, I'm going to close the public hearing, so just bear with us while we do some administrative things. Before we continue, we just finished our other business. New other business, do we have a report from Director of Community Development? No. And commission matters? Commissioners, anything you'd like to share? Okay, so I am now adjourning the public hearing for February 23. And I am now beginning the study session for Ditto's Lane. But before we do so, I'm going to ask for 5 minutes so that we have all of those that are going to be participating in this all grouped together. So 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and start. Huh? Okay, I'm going to call us back into session. Okay, so we are now beginning the study session for 20 Ditto's Lane. It is a plan development application PD-01-002, Environmental Impact Report EIR-10-001. Administratively, there are certain things we have to do. For example, we need to do roll call. So Ms. Bailey, would you please provide that?
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Here.
Commissioner Ogle? Here. Commissioner Talasfor? Here. Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Jensen?
Here.
Commissioner Sayoc?
Here.
And Tom O'Donnell has an excused absence.
Okay. And verbal communications. If there is someone in attendance that would like to speak on something other than Ditto's Lane, you may do so at this time. I see none, so let's go ahead and go to our study session. So before we begin, what I want to do is I want to preface it with the purpose of tonight's meeting and then the process that I plan to employ, okay? Similar to the meeting that we had last, I believe it was January 23, correct me if I'm wrong, that was specific to listen to public testimony on the draft environmental impact report. This meeting tonight also has a specific purpose. It's a study session. It is for the commissioners to ask the applicant, in this case our staff as well as a co-applicant, questions or request information or clarification before the actual public hearing that will take place on March 9th. I will have public testimony. There are many of you that are very familiar in face as well as the name. I have 20 cards similar to last time. We have been taking copious notes. We have all that in our record. So I just want to remind people that all that has been retained. We have that. There's no need to repeat things, but if you feel like you really need to in your 3 minutes, go ahead. And in terms of process, the official hearing where deliberations and decisions will be made will take place on March 9th. That will not occur tonight, okay? So in terms of process, staff, I'll have you and the consultants do a presentation, and then I'll go ahead and open public testimony, and then after public testimony, we'll take a quick break so that we can make sure that all of the questions and comments that we heard are pulled together and that those can be addressed at the end. Okay? Okay, so if there are any questions, none, let's go ahead and start. So Ms. Bailey, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, Mr. Paulson will be giving the report.
All right, good evening, Chair Sayoc, Planning Commissioners, members of the public. Staff also wanted to state that there is a desk item for this matter. We received 4 additional information items from members of the public, and copies of the desk item are available outside on the table just outside the chambers. The study session this evening is intended to allow the Planning Commission and the public to ask questions, as Chair Sayoc stated, and then receive information from both staff and the applicant. No consultants are here this evening. They will be here at the March 9th hearing. And the intent is to discuss land use matters relating to the proposed project. At our last meeting, as Chair Sayoc stated, we received a number of comments as well as written comments up to the February 4th deadline for the comments on the draft EIR. Currently, staff and the town's consultants are working to prepare what is termed a response to comments to address all of those comments. All of those will be addressed as part of the draft EIR process, and we're anticipating that those comments are going to be available March 4th. No action tonight is going to be taken. The action, as Chair Sayoc stated, will be on March 9th, where the Planning Commission will formulate a recommendation to the Town Council on both the proposed development as well as the EIR. Following the Commission's recommendation, the Council will consider the EIR as well as the proposed development, and we are tentatively scheduled to be heard before the Council on April 4th. Staff and the applicant are available to answer questions. However, there may be some questions that are not able to be addressed this evening, or are elements that are going to be addressed in the response to comments, and so those will be available for the March 9th, either through the response to comments or as additional information items from staff and or the applicant and or consultants on the March 9th meeting. And that concludes staff's report, and staff will defer to the applicants to provide a presentation regarding the proposed development. So with that, we'll turn that over to Jonathan Imami.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission, staff, members of the community. My name is Jonathan Imami. I'm the Vice President of Rome Development Corporation. First off, I'd like to start by thanking staff for all the work that they did to put together tonight's presentation and the information in the packets. A little bit about Rome. We are a real estate development company that focuses both on the development and construction of affordable housing. Our company is based here in Santa Clara, locally. We have built approximately 1,500 units in the area of affordable apartments and currently have under construction approximately 500 units from the Bay Area to San Diego. One of the unique things about our company is that we're vertically integrated with in-house development and construction. We feel that that enables us to bring a higher level of quality control, detail, and overall management to the process from beginning to end, all the way from acquisition, development, design, construction, and overall management of the product. A little bit about history about 20 Didos Lane, what we're presenting tonight. Tonight I'm joined by others from Rome as well as our project architect and civil engineer. Before I invite our project architect up, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the site and its statistics. About 2 years ago, we got involved with the parcel, the Didos Lane site. We originally approached the seller to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement, and in light of the draft housing element and the goals stated within, and the site being in the affordable housing overlay zone, we worked with the seller to tie up the property and then present the property to the Town of Los Gatos Redevelopment Agency to discuss the potential development of an affordable housing project. Subsequent to that, we passed the project along to the redevelopment agency, assigned the contract to the redevelopment agency, and the redevelopment agency purchased the property, and we entered into exclusive right to negotiate, and later PD permit and environmental assessment that began in June and recently ended in December. Tonight, for the benefit of everyone here, we have the site 20 Didos Lane off Main Street, in between College Avenue and the Los Gatos Creek Trail on Highway 17. Some of the statistics about the project: 1.49 acres in size. Our proposed planned development permit is for 32 units, 16 two-bedrooms, 16 one-bedroom. Calculates to an approximate density of 21.5 units per acre. Lot coverage, maximum allowable 40%. Our proposed project is for 23% lot coverage. As for the parking, we currently, in our planned development permit application, have designed for 58 spaces, of which 40 are garage and 18 are surface, with 2 shuffle tandem parking spaces in addition. At this time, I would like to invite up Keith Labus, our project architect, to give a little bit more detail about the site plan and concept, and we'll come back for questions after. Thank you.
Good evening. Before I get into the layout of the project, I'd like to just state that we felt there was a significant historical value to the architecture that was previously on the site. And so you'll see in the pictures on the wall behind you and the image we're going to show here that we chose to go with the traditional architecture craftsman style here, using traditional materials such as stone, siding, so moving into the layout of the site here, what you see here is, and if it's easier to see over there behind you, the access to the site here off of Didos Lane. We have College Avenue to the south here, with the creek access to the north and existing townhomes to the west. Our concept here was to try to maintain as much open space as possible and to try to maintain visually the same feeling from surrounding areas that was there before. So what we've done here is taken what we'll call Building A, Building B. We've taken Building A, placed the parking underneath 2 levels of residential units, tucked it back into the hillside, similar to what was there before, to visually minimize the impact from College Avenue, as well as trying to maximize the open space, which is down here off of the Creek Trail. You'll see off of Dittos Lane, the entry drive comes in. We've got tandem garages tucking under the building here, which are then, the garages are used as retaining to retain the hillside behind, trying to push the building as far as we can towards College to open this up as much as possible. Building B here, running perpendicular to College Avenue, the same thing. We have garages, there you go, garages tucked under 2 stories of units on this side of the building, with another level of residential units on the back side facing existing townhomes, as well as a community room here on the first floor, which relates to this common open space and the Creek Trail. Here's a view taken from the north side of the site, as if you were standing, I guess, above the Creek Trail, looking across the open space back at the building, Building A. So here you see the use of traditional craftsman materials, the stone, ornamental fixtures, decorative garage doors, siding, shutters, pot shelves, wood rails, all that. Here you see, arrow's not working here. Oh, there you go. The 2 entries to the building here, with common stairs that access all the units there. And here you see private patios overlooking the common open space. Here's a view taken from the entry drive off Dittos Lane. Here you see the garage doors to the tandem garages tucked under Building A, open spaces to the right with open space, common open space, the other side of the parking. Here you can see lush landscaping in between the garage doors, decorative garage doors, lighting, et cetera, with Building B in the background. This is the north side, south side of Building A facing College Avenue. This isn't what you see from College Avenue. There's really just 2 points I wanted to make here. That this is what you can see if you look down on the project from College Avenue above the garage level. So it's 2 stories of residential units. This dashed line, which you see here, is actually the line of existing grade at the face of that building. So we are adjusting grade to push the building down as much as we can. This line you see up here is the elevation of College Avenue. So what you can see we've done here is pushed it down below the elevation of College Avenue, which is similar to what the existing building or the previous building was before. Here's an overall site plan, landscaping plan. The point we really wanted to make here is that we are providing as much landscape as possible on the site to really enhance it. These kind of ghosted trees that you see here on the bottom are the existing trees located on the slope of College Avenue. Everything else you see is proposed landscape, and I wanted to bring special attention to the buffer that we're trying to provide there adjacent to the townhomes. Here's a site section through Building A to demonstrate how we're nestling the building into the hillside. This is Building A with the tandem garages tucked in underneath with 2 levels of living units up above, tucked in the slope here, drive aisle, and the private open space, or common open space, I'm sorry, here. This right here is College Avenue, so as you can see, we're well below the level of College Avenue there. Here's a section cut through Building B. This is further west, so you can see as College Avenue goes west, it gets higher, so College Avenue is even higher above Building B than it is above Building A. Here's a section cut adjacent to the southerly southwest of the 2 townhome buildings there, showing that the existing grade, the finished floor of the townhome building there, is actually approximately 12 feet above the first floor, finished floor of proposed Building B. So the existing townhome is just about equal to the height of the proposed Building B on this property. This is a simulation taken from the second floor deck of the fourplex to the east. This is actually wrong, this is incorrect, or should I say incomplete, in that these are only showing proposed trees. This does not include the existing trees that are there. So if we were to show that, you'd basically just see a slide full of leaves. So we thought we'll show what we're providing there, and then in addition to what's already there. And these are shown at a 15-year growth. Here's a simulation from the northwestern townhome building, showing the grade outside the building here with our building beyond, the proposed building B, and with adjacent tree buffer planted here, and the approximate location of the fence on that property to see what you would see over that fence and over that landscape. And then finally, we did some shadow studies to show that there would be no impact on adjacent properties from this project. This is taken on June 21st during the summer, and you can see here that looking at all three studies there, at no time do our buildings project shadows onto adjacent properties. And even here you'll see on December 21st, in the worst case scenario, the same thing. We're not projecting. All these shadows are coming from trees and from the existing buildings there. So there's no shadow impact, should I say, on adjacent properties. And I guess that's it. We're available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions at this point? Commissioner Bushwell.
Can I ask a process question of the chair first?
Yes.
Should we hold off on the bulk of our questions until after we receive public input, or are we going to have an opportunity, like once we hear from the public, to question the project team, or?
What I was envisioning, if you had specific questions or clarifications of the presentation, I would do it now. Afterwards, I will open public testimony. Each person has 3 minutes. And then after all public testimony, I will close it. I will take a 10 to 15-minute break so that the list of questions and concerns we have heard tonight can be synthesized and we can address them all at one shot. If there are still issues that we as commissioners feel haven't been addressed, that could be an opportunity, again, to ask those questions. So there are 3 times, I guess, as you as a commissioner can ask those. But if there's anything specific to this presentation, I would go ahead and do it so now.
Could we ask these gentlemen to introduce so I know who's available? Like, for example, is there someone here to address traffic and?
Mr. Paulson, I don't know if you want to make those, or if individually you guys would like to introduce yourselves and your area of expertise so we know who exactly is in attendance that can answer these questions.
Mr. Amami can answer that.
Okay.
As Mr. Paulson had mentioned earlier on, there are no consultants here representing the environmental impact report on our behalf who we're here tonight.
Can you introduce your team?
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. Again, my name is Jonathan Amami, the Vice President of Rome Development Corporation. Keith Labus of KTGY Group, who's our project architect. And then we have Mike Sheehy of Ruth and Going, who's our civil engineer. We also have Ben and Derek, also from KTGY and Rome Development. If you have any questions, I would propose that you direct them to myself as the developer, Keith Labus as the project architect, or Mike Sheehy as the civil engineer.
Okay. Okay, and we are taking copious notes, and for the record, every time you do answer, if you could just state again who, since these, when we transcribe these afterwards, we're going to need to know who's speaking. Sure. So if you could just quickly say who it is before you answer the question. Commissioner Bourgeois, did that answered process-wise?
Yes.
Okay. And
I have a lot of questions. I'm just not sure if I should wait or ask them now. So.
You know, we have so many speakers tonight.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and let the public go ahead and ask and make any of their issues aired, and then afterwards we'll have lots of opportunity. So if that's okay with my commissioners? Okay, let's go ahead. I have 20 speaker cards, and as I mentioned, a lot of faces are familiar, a lot of names are familiar. We have all those notes with us. I am going to call 5 at a time just to start a queue so that you will know who will be speaking at what order, and let's try and get this through as efficiently as we can. The first speaker is Lisa Tooley. Afterwards will be Andrew Wu, Rosalie Ash, Carolyn Reese, and then Todd Davis. So, Ms. Tooley? And for the next 4 speakers, if you can just go ahead and get ready to speak after Ms. Tooley.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Tooley, and I reside at 120 College Terrace, Unit L. And it is the unit that is directly adjacent to the property that is being developed. I wanted to start by saying that when we first purchased the property, it was blighted, and we were really anxious to know how this redevelopment would happen, and we were glad when it first started. I made contact with the town and talked to the project manager, and we talked a lot about the project, and, you know, as an affordable housing advocate at one time in Santa Clara County, we were you know, kind of happy that the town was taking this project on. And from my initial conversations, at which time I was told that there would be a 40 to 50 foot setback and that the buildings would be below grade from my deck and my property, the plans have changed significantly, and thus my opinion of the project has changed as well. I know that you're familiar with an affordable housing overlay zone, and this allows the town to do things that it wouldn't normally be able to do, including increased density and variations on the setback, variations on the parking. There are a lot of things that you can do, and it offers a lot of flexibility. But that doesn't mean that every property is appropriate for maximizing every single buildable space. And that's really our concern. There are 2 concerns that we really have. One is that the property is so close, it's 20 feet away, it's not below grade. As the gentleman said, or Mr. Amani said earlier, it's even with our deck. And there are 12 balconies proposed to be facing the deck. We consider that to be a significant land use issue. Additionally, the way the buildings were situated prior to this, there was space in between, so should there have been any kind of fire emergency, a fire truck and apparatus could have gotten around and, you know, put out a fire on our deck or our area or adjoining houses or the other units. And with this new proposed project, it's moved up to the point that it's 20 feet away and there's no throughway anymore. At the beginning of the project, again at the public hearing, there was talk about adding additional access, and that since has gone away because it's not feasible to do that. But on October 2nd, 2010, a fire truck did get stuck in our property and was not able to turn around without dumping 3,400 gallons of water. So with reducing the density and moving the project up a little bit, I think we would be fine to support it, but we have a lot of questions and are very interested in the safety aspects.
Thank you, Ms. Tooley. Next speaker is Andrew Wu.
Yes, before I begin, may I ask a clarification question for the developers? Is there nobody from the team to answer environmental impact questions?
Actually, Mr. Wu, if I can, I'll answer that for you, or Mr. Paulson, you can. The environmental impact report, those responses are currently being synthesized, and the official response, we don't have that yet, and those are not coming to us until March 4th, and it will be ready for the March 9th public hearing.
But then we won't have an opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments to the council to ask of the developers.
At the March 9th hearing.
Isn't that, but there's going to be action taken at the March 9th hearing?
After public testimony, correct.
Isn't that a little late to have those questions posed at that point in time?
You know, that's the process, and
well, shouldn't the development team have brought somebody then today?
Actually, you know, I'm going to have to ask that these process questions, this is the process as outlined. They do not have their environmental consultants with them. And so really, if you want to use your 3 minutes.
Well, should we not adjourn then and have a special session where those questions could be answered?
At this time, we are taking public testimony and questions on the material we have before us.
Which is incomplete.
It's what we have currently.
Exactly, which is incomplete.
So, Mr. Wu, I understand your frustration, but I'm going to have to, is this your 3 minutes or?
For my 3 minutes, I'll be very quick with my comments then. If you want to start, go ahead. My question simply would be then, where is the environmental impact study with respect to traffic? I didn't see that in the draft report. No hard data was put forth, at least incomplete data. That would be the question that I would ask this council to ask of the developers. Since there's nobody here who can answer those questions, I don't see what good that's going to do. So if I could give my minutes to Mr. Davis, I would, but I understand those aren't part of the House rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Okay. Rosalie Ash?
Chair, could I?
Yes. Bushwa?
I think there might have been some confusion, maybe it's on my part, but that was the purpose of the whole last meeting we had, was to receive questions and input on the environmental impact report, and we are formulating a response to that, and then the public can still provide input if they still want to give additional input via writing still. That until the 5th, I believe, is that correct?
Mr. Paulson, can you clarify exactly what comments can be taken with regard to the environmental impact report and with regard to the overall project until
Sure.
March 9th?
We will take comments or questions for clarification on any aspects of the project. Anything that we're not able to answer this evening will be answered in either the response to comments or at the 3/9 public hearing, or the March 9th public hearing. The comment period for the draft EIR ended on February 4th. So we'll still take additional questions and clarification. They will not be addressed in the response to comments as part of the official environmental impact report, but they still can be addressed at the 3/9 or the subsequent town council hearing should they continue to be raised.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that.
And Mr. Paulson, just to clarify, on March 4th is when we always anticipate the staff reports for every hearing to come the Friday beforehand. On the 4th, all the information that's available to commissioners will also be available to anyone interested in this project?
That is what staff is anticipating, and that's when we're hoping that it's available to us as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Ash, go ahead.
Yes, I live at 83 College Avenue, right across from the project.
Actually, Ms. Ash, I can't really hear you. Thank you.
Okay. I live at 83 College Avenue, right across from the project. These are my comments about the project as I've been reading through the EIR and looking down at the property every day. The biggest problem with the Ditto's Lane project is overzealous density. The project buildings are too large, too high, too close to existing structures. The developers have proposed an oversized complex on a postage stamp-sized lot. The excessive height needed to accommodate so many apartments will significantly impact the surrounding properties. Unsightly roof lines, blocked views, increased shadowing, noise, smells, and removal of beautiful trees. Overzealous density on a small lot greatly impacts on-site parking. The 64-plus residents will probably each have 1+ cars. The proposed 58 parking spaces will not meet the needs of the tenants. What is really needed is at least 80 spaces, as indicated in Table 4.1-1, zoning compliance. That table indicates that 2.5 spaces should be allotted for each unit, or 80 resident parking spaces, not 58. Overzealous density severely limits visitor parking also. A mere 9 visitor parking spaces shows a gross underestimation of the needs of the Ditto's Lane community. It is noted in the EIR, page 4.8-18, a town code could require up to 1 visitor parking space per unit. This means that there should be 32 visitor parking spaces, not 9. Related to visitor parking is parking for service trucks such as FedEx, UPS, repair vehicles, disabled persons, shuttle vans, etc. No doubt these vehicles will park illegally near the buildings and create a hazardous situation. Overzealous density leads to inadequate parking solutions such as the proposed tandem garages. The type of parking solution indicates that the developers did not allow enough open space for parking around the buildings. The result, increased building heights, blocked views, and annoying parking methods. In reality, most residents will not want to park their cars one behind the other. Reduce the number of apartments and better possibilities emerge. Less traffic, less congestion at Maple Lane and Main Street, more open space for realistic parking, and far less blockage of vistas for everyone. Less is more should be the guiding philosophy to produce an exemplary Ditto's Lane project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ash. Carolyn Reese.
My name is Carolyn Reese. My brother and I live at 33 College Avenue. I would like to second the comments of Mrs. Tooley and Ms. Ash. Those are also my concerns. I think what this project does to the Tooley's home is just deplorable. I just can't believe the city would allow the value of young people's new home to be damaged in such a way. The two issues that I didn't see addressed in the environmental impact report is the impact on the entry to the Los Gatos Creek Trail, which is very heavily used and is a great popular attraction to bringing people to Los Gatos, and it also draws people to local businesses. I also find it very hard to believe that the lane can be widened and made satisfactory for access without putting retaining walls below. Since I live on that hill, I'm aware how much and how fast it moves. And I didn't see anything about possible damage to the Los Gatos Creek Trail, which is beloved and used by hundreds of people. There are always people down there going in and out of the trail. There's going to be construction. There's going to be paving, repaving, construction vehicles going in. The cyclists and the hikers are going to use another entry point, and the businesses that depend on foot traffic along there are going to lose their customers, and I'm afraid we're going to lose businesses such as the coffee roasting company and possibly the runner's shoe store. So those are some of my concerns that haven't been brought up before.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Todd Davis. And then after Mr. Davis, the next five is Cameron Tooley, Chris Bevis, Susan Kenkel, Megan Clausey, and Marlene Johnson.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Todd Davis, and I own 18 Dittos Lane, which is the apartment building immediately to the east of the project at 20 Dittos Lane. I've owned that building for 10 years, and I lived in that building for approximately 12 years. I lived there when I purchased it. For 25 years, the Guerra family tried to develop 20 Dittos Lane. Each of their proposed projects were much more sensible in scale and design than the proposed project here today. Each of those proposed projects were rejected by this town for various reasons. Those projects ranged anywhere from 4 units to 10 units, each one of which would have protected the native oak trees, which are mature, would not have widened the road, would not have destroyed Maple and Dittos Lane as it is today. The staff report addresses some of the reasons why those projects were rejected, and I think the staff report is inaccurate. I think the staff report is inaccurate in many regards, but particularly in stating that the Guerra's project was rejected because it did not improve Maple or Dittos Lane. That actually was their primary objective, and that actually went to litigation. The Guerras sued my predecessor in interest, they sued the Moss family, and they sued the town. The town at that time, in 1991, took the position, and they did this in a responsive pleading by then town attorney Mary Jo Levenger, now Judge Levenger. And as Ms. Propp will tell you, a responsive pleading by the town is deemed verified. At that time, it was the town's position that they wanted to preserve the green belt along Dittos and Maple Lane. That was their position. That was what they litigated in court. That was the action they took at trial. That was their position at trial. And now the town wants to mow down every single tree along Maple and Dittos Lane. And they want to do that so that they can jam this project down the throats of every single neighbor in the neighborhood. I myself, of course, am particularly impacted. It impacts my tenants. It impacts my children because that building is going to pay for their college education, or that was the plan. It impacts everybody in this room. And I think the only reason it is happening is to increase the profits of Mr. Imani and his company, and for Mr. Lortz to have his one final project, and for the town to be able to use their developmental money before it goes away. Thank you.
Cameron Tooley.
Hi, I'm Cameron Tooley. I'm a neighbor of the 20 Dittos Lane. I live on College Terrace Unit L with my wife Lisa, and I too am not opposed to low or moderate low income buildings, but the density of this project is too high in my opinion. And what I wanted to mention tonight is that to ask you to please review the public comments thoroughly once they're available to you, and the responses from staff, because I think it raises many conflicting questions with what the staff had put in the report and the consultants. And the mitigations were glossed over and say, yeah, we can mitigate that easily, which I think you'll see that aren't true. Many of the mitigations, in fact, are quite large and should have been in part of the plans initially. If example is the Maple and Dittos Lane expansion, that wasn't even part of it. It was kind of a mitigation. It's like it's got 2 paragraphs worth, and there's no plans for it or anything. Why is that? The other thing is that widening is going to have a large cost. It's very vaguely described. It's going to degrade the trees, as Mr. Davis pointed out, and it's going to be cost the town eminent domain cost for taking private land, and significantly affect the trail entrance, which is the main trail entrance to Los Gatos Creek Trail. Again, very vague on how that's going to happen. Another oddity is that, and I just saw the slides tonight, some elevations, and in the lobby that actually showed some elevations from College Terrace point of view, but I've been asking for that, my wife and I have been asking for that since 2009, November, at the first public meeting, and we haven't seen them, and they weren't in the DIR. So nobody reading this report, unless they go down to our property with the story poles there finally, will actually see the impact from College Terrace. So I don't know why that it was hidden, or is it purposely or not, I don't know. But I think that's wrong. And then the drawings that were just shown just now, take note that those are for 15 years, and as young as my wife and I may look, we'll be retired by then. So, and also those were not to scale; those were just depictions. That's what they mentioned in the lobby today. So, in summary, I just want to make sure you ask you please review the comments thoroughly, and the public comments thoroughly, and that a project about half the density would probably work in this land, as Mr. Davis pointed out very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris Bevis.
Hi, my name is Chris Bevis. I live at 81 College with my wife, Gail. Firstly, I was very heartened by the thoughtful concern you gave to the Jared Lane and Town Terrace projects. In particular, the fact that you recognize that not every lot can accommodate a sport court or a swimming pool really shows a great sensitivity to neighbors' rights. Similarly, I appreciate the fact that the developers in the Town Terrace development worked with the neighbors and gained their approval. I'd like to point out that the situation on Ditto's Lane is very different from both of these. No one in the neighborhood supports this project in its current form. I think we're all generally supportive of the concept of affordable housing, but this project is grossly insensitive to the neighbors. It's going to have a serious blighting effect. There are going to be hundreds of feet of exposed roof line with exposed pipes, vents, et cetera, facing College Avenue, facing into College Avenue, as well as the houses. You know, my master bedroom faces directly onto the site from about 30 feet over the street surface, and the views that were shown really do not represent what people will see from College Avenue, and I think that's relatively disingenuous. You know, if you look at the general plan, if you look at the goals in it, this project really violates just about every one of them. If you look at the specifics of it and what loopholes and ways you can bend the rules, yeah, you can fit it into the general plan. Even then, you have to change the zoning on the project, grant variances that grossly increase the height of the project over what's allowed. You know, if anyone else proposed this project, it would be laughed out of this council. And the fact that the town is both the applicant, prepared the draft environmental impact report, and is responsible for reviewing it, I think represents a conflict of interest. The fact that the town negotiated the deal to purchase the property at 2 or 3 times its market value, then negotiated with Rome to develop it in a no-bid contract, really shows a lack of good faith on the part of the town. And I think this project deserves much more scrutiny than it's been given so far. And I really encourage you to take the concerns of the neighbors seriously and the people of the town, and not just rubber stamp this project, not just say, oh, we've got to do it for some feel-good reason. Thank you very much.
Susan Kenkel.
Susan Kenkel, 99 Reservoir Road. The town code implements the overall land use through planning provisions formulated in the town's general plan. The zoning regulations are provided, and I quote, to promote and protect the public health, the safety, peace, morals, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the town and its inhabitants, and particularly, and this is also a quote, to provide a guide for the development of the town to preserve its character of low-density residential communities, to promote the social and economic stability of the town, to promote a safe, effective traffic circulation system, to preserve the natural beauty of the town, and to protect its residential neighborhoods from the intrusion of commercial interests, and to assure the orderly and beneficial development of all areas of the town. Since the Ditto's Lane project does not meet any of these provisions, it must not be allowed to go forward. The proposed variance in zoning must be denied. It's interesting that this entire project has been put into action without notice to the general public. The condemnation of the site, the purchase of the property, the demolition of the buildings, the selection of the developers in a no-bid award, and the conveyance of the property for 55 years to these developers. Now that it is finally part of the public record, it is obvious from the residents' reaction and the opposition to this plan that the development is not in accordance with the town residents' wishes or welfare. It's time to step back and consider using this site to further those elements which make Los Gatos so special and to further the needs of its present inhabitants. Open spaces, recreational areas like a dog park, and improved traffic and parking. Thank you.
Megan Clausey.
Hi, I'm Megan Clausey. I live at 130 College Avenue. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the traffic impacts that this project is going to have on us. I love our neighborhood. I think it's beautiful, but the one sacrifice that we all seem to have to make is dealing with traffic, specifically high school traffic. I have 2 children that I have to take to school in the morning and that I have to pick up around 3 o'clock. And for me to go to Van Meter, I can't go down College and I can't go right on Main Street. I have to go down College, left on Main, right on University, right on Blossom Hill, right on Los Gatos Boulevard. It takes me about 25 minutes to get to school, because if I were to go right on Main by the high school, it would probably take me about 45 minutes. So basically, the only way I can get out of College Avenue is to go left on Main Street. And if we put in this project, now I'm not even going to be able to go left on Main Street. Some mornings when I try to go to school, if there's even one delivery truck that's illegally parked, maybe it's dropping off food at an Italian restaurant or something, it backs up traffic all the way on Main Street, all the way up onto College Avenue. There's a whole hillside community, a whole hillside neighborhood by the winery, by Jones, by Euclid. The only way we get out of our neighborhood, the only way, is from College to Main. Well, in the morning when school is going, you can't go right on Main. At lunchtime, you can't go right on Main. Around 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you can't go right on Main. It will take you 45 minutes to go about 6 blocks. Now I feel like we're not going to be able to go left either, because if you are adding the equivalent of 32 homes worth of people all feeding into like a driveway-sized area, and they're going to have to get in and out of that area from Main Street, it is going to completely back up our neighborhood, and we're not even going to be able to get out of our street. So I just really want you to consider the traffic implications of this project. And I also just want to say that I really think the town should care more about the people's homes that are really being negatively affected here, their views, their decks, their balconies. I mean, these are people's lives. These are their homes. And they didn't buy their homes expecting that this high-density project would go in right there. And I really think that you need to have more sensitivity to those neighbors. Thank you. Next is Marlene Johnson. After Marlene, we'll have Brad Clausey, Todd Johnson, Diane Schmidt, Catherine Galler, and Maria Young.
Hello. My name is Marlene Johnson. I live at 85 College Avenue. I do not believe the environmental impact report took into consideration the negative effect the proposed project would have on the residents along College Avenue and College Terrace. My home looks directly down on the proposed 32-unit apartment complex. We have lived in that home for almost 18 years and have enjoyed the views from our home and the overall serenity of the area. My concern is not that the proposed project is designed for low-income housing. That is not the issue. My concern is how the proposed high-density 32 units will impact my home, my home, the enjoyment of my home, and the value of the homes of the residents along College Avenue and College Terrace. I am a real estate appraiser. I have been appraising single-family homes in the area for over 30 years. I have appraised proposed subdivisions, and I have done feasibility studies. I am very experienced in areas that affect value. When appraising a home, I consider external factors that affect value. Factors include noise, traffic, structures that affect views, and the overall visual appeal of adjacent properties. It is my opinion that a proposed high-density 32-unit apartment complex is not well-suited to the area. The development will create above-normal noise factors from apartment residents in 32 units entering and leaving their apartments, from car doors of 50-plus or more cars opening and closing in the early morning and evening, noise of 32 to possibly 50 occupants talking in the early morning and late night. In addition, I believe the already impacted parking along College Avenue from joggers and hikers will be significantly more impacted by visitors to this complex. We often cannot even park in front of our own homes as it currently is. Traffic is already an issue on the street, thus increased traffic will be a problem and a safety hazard. We currently have a very nice view from the homes on College Avenue. A 3-story high-density apartment structure will definitely affect the current views that we have. We will be looking down directly on a large complex and a parking structure. In short, as an appraiser, I clearly believe not only will our quiet enjoyment and serenity be affected, the value of our homes will significantly be affected. I realize the town of Los Gatos had an obligation to afford affordable housing in the town, but I believe the town also has an obligation to protect the existing residents in the area and the value of their homes. The town has an obligation to consider the impact of such a high-density project on the residents and on the property values. The subject site on Ditto Lane is not well-suited for this project and is well-suited for a smaller subdivision of 5 or 6 homes. As we heard from earlier feasibility studies, studies indicated the site is best suited for single-family homes. I feel the environmental impact report did not address or consider the effects of this development on the adjacent property owners on College and College Terrace. I respectfully request the town to review and consider reducing the development to a much smaller project. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Clausey.
Hi, I'm Brad Clausey. I live at 130 College Ave. My comments, I'll echo the comments my wife made. The issue for us is peak traffic. In the mornings when we're leaving, it's already, as my wife stated, the case that we can only really go out one direction when we're leaving our property to take the kids to school and go to work, whatnot. This development will simply inject more traffic into a intersection which I would describe as gridlocked already during the morning rush hour. The EIR seems to completely hand wave the issues of the traffic impact at that intersection. My reading of the EIR indicates also that their traffic sampling was not done during the school year, which I think is of a substantial impact. On a more subjective basis, I just find in general that this development is completely out of character with the surrounding area, and I think it imposes density and environmental impacts on the neighborhood that I can confidently say would not pass muster with this planning commission were it not for the town's own vested interests in seeing it completed.
Diane Schmidt.
I'm Diane Schmidt. I live at 145 College Avenue. I have a couple of issues that I don't think have been addressed, and the project team made a very, very nice presentation tonight, but I think it was very incomplete. I haven't seen anything about modifications of Ditto's Lane near the trailhead or widening of the access. That seems to be completely missing from their presentation, and I'd like them to address that tonight. That is maybe part of the environmental impact, but it's also part of the complete project. Many others have already spoken very well to some of my other considerations. Mainly for me, it is safe access for all of us in that very, very tight area between the trail and College and Main, the intersection onto the high school. It is, the trailhead is sort of a showcase of the town, and it's going to have to be preserved, and I certainly hope it's going to be safe for everybody who continues to use it. I don't want to see some child or dog or biker or hiker come out of that trailhead and face the car coming too quickly coming out of Ditto's Lane. I agree with many people who have already spoken tonight that the low-cost housing is a good project for there, but not the density and not the traffic impact that we have with the current proposal.
Catherine Galler.
Hello, my name is Catherine Galler. I live at 120K College Terrace. Actually, I own the property, and I think I'm almost the most impacted. I'm at the far corner of that a building B where I have the decks, and I noticed that I had a prepared speech, and everybody said pretty much everything I want to say, and I want to turn to all my neighbors and thank you for caring about my setbacks and my views, because I didn't think anybody would care. And when I first got a notice in December that they were building this project of 32 units, I was hysterical. And I live in Riverside with my paralyzed son, and I take care of him. So I came up here and made flyers, and I passed them out all around. I had 1,000 flyers that I gave out to the neighbors saying, please stop this project, please help. You know, this is going to change the dynamics of Los Gatos, this cute little town that I just love, that my son graduated from, that I hope to come back and live here someday. And I want to thank the board here for taking the time to go out and look at those big orange poles at the other people. And I noticed how you paid attention to their privacy, and that it seemed to matter to you. I really felt that the city of Los Gatos was going to rubber stamp this, and that it didn't care if I came up here. I drove from Riverside to come to talk to you tonight. Those pictures that they had up there, those buildings tower over my deck, that I worked very hard as a single mother to acquire this property. And I will lose $200,000 in a moment when they build that. I wanted to mention to you when I purchased the property in 1985 that I had a preliminary title report that said I had 19.2 at the end of my property and 15.2 for setbacks. Well, the city has revised this, and they have gone back 60 years or whatever, and now they say that we only have a 10-foot setback instead of a 19-foot setback. So now they're basing where they're going to put this property, they're going to put it 20 feet from their new 10-foot setback that I have. Well, you know, these people are looking right down. If you're concerned about the privacy of these other people, please be concerned about mine. Noise. On my deck, I bought that property even though it was noisy. Anyway, I have 75 decibels on my patio, and I'm concerned about this property being so close that I'll have ricochet noise, or that the long aisle that will have more noise than the 75 decibels that I already have. And at 85, it's considered hazardous to one's health. The density is the problem. The traffic is the problem. It's a bad project. It was overpaid for. One other thing. Additional costs for this parcel. I can't tell you. There's many. But am I done? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have Maria Young, and then afterwards, Terry Maas, Richard Allen, Jack Van Natta, Lee Quintana, and then Mary Lyle Rempel.
Hi, my name is Maria Young, and I live at 121 College Avenue. My concern with the Ditto's Lane project is the number of units being proposed and the real traffic issues on College Avenue and Main Street. Instead of talking about traffic, I wanted to take some pictures that are representative of what we experience every day. I positioned myself near the Soda Works on College Avenue, and these pictures, let me go back, were taken yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Immediately as I got my camera out, this person made a U-turn to get this parking spot. People make U-turns to get into parking spots and to get out of parking spots, to go back down. 2 minutes later, I think, the bus came up the street, and this is going to Testarossa. 4 minutes later, we have the FedEx truck coming up the street. Then we have the By-Right, which comes up College Avenue. It's going through the intersection. And this is just kind of to show you the types of vehicles that are going through that intersection. Here we have cars at the stop sign. And notice how there's so much space over on the right side of the road. And here's a car that's made a right turn. And you can see these are small cars, but yet it seems kind of narrow. We have a car making a right turn, and then this one making the left turn, and you can kind of see the right turns always veer towards the center, and so do the left turns. And here's another example where they're just kind of, right down the middle of the road. Now, we're lucky because this car was parked correctly. This car came up and, whoops. This car came up and parked illegally. This happens all the time. Drop off, pick up people, get coffee. Look what happens when this car is parked here. This car had to veer. I don't know what this guy was doing. He had no, I don't know. There was no reason. Again, cars kind of, going towards the center of the road. And this is my favorite, the people who make U-turns. If you're behind these people and you think that they're going up College Avenue, all of a sudden they'll do a U-turn. And this is a small car. There's, large trucks that do it. This is the FedEx car that came up the street and now it's stopped here. This is my personal favorite. This is in my car in front of my house on garbage day last year. Look at this Coca-Cola truck. This is going to either Testarossa, the convent, or the novitiate. I don't think that people really realize, and that's why I wanted to take the picture, so you really get an idea of what it's like to live on College Avenue. Really quickly, my first picture was at 2:58 p.m. The last picture of the FedEx truck was at 3:12. What you saw is a 14-minute snapshot of that intersection on a quiet Tuesday afternoon with no school in session, no hikers, no bikers. Thank you.
Terry Moss and Ms. Young, I was holding my breath hoping I didn't see my car in your pictures.
They could have been my neighbors too, I don't know.
Good evening, Terry Moss representing the folks that live at the Penthouse Apartments. As a developer myself, I am astounded at the speed with which this project is going forward. For a town that it loves its historic monuments, how you can knock one down in a week is amazing. I'm concerned about the cost overruns, the amount budgeted for the road that our family owns. We own a great deal of Maple. Has been under budgeted. Today, the city still doesn't know how it's going to widen Maple wide enough for 2 lanes. There's a storm drain and a bridge abutment on one side and the beauty parlor on the other. So this is astounding to me as somebody that has to deal in the real world, how when a project was appraised at $1 million, the city buys it for $3 million. I don't understand the calculus there. The bottom line is we would support a low-income project that does not cause Diddles Lane or Maple to be widened. I know this is a little boring, but if you go, please walk down Maple, all of you, if you get the time, and look at the trees that are marked. And when those go, that grain belt goes, and the 80 people at the Penthouse Apartments are going to be looking at the freeway and listening to it. So we have 80 people impacted on one side for the benefit of 30. If we can make this a smaller project, like the city has always insisted on for the last 30 years, I would be for that. I have one specific question, and that is I manage 3,500 apartment communities in the Bay Area, and it's impossible for us to control our residents to not store in their parking areas. This project is grossly underparked, and I really ask the developer how you plan to control people from not storing, because these are small units. They're going to store in their garages, and there's going to be less parking. They're going to go Maple. They're going to go on our property. That's my question, specific question. Thank you.
Richard Allen?
I'm Richard Allen. I live at 172 College Avenue. I've provided the written comments on some of the things I'll be talking about. I just want to call to your attention that there are problems with traffic, there are problems with parking, there are problems with perhaps title in the environmental impact report. The traffic congestion is really underestimated. The environmental impact report estimates 16 trips at each of peak hours in the morning and the afternoon. Well, with 32 apartments, half of them two-bedroom, I figure that the number of trips in the morning, if everyone's going to work, is more like 64 to 80 trips than 16. The environmental impact report says the 95th percentile queue of 2 vehicles on College Avenue will not be seriously impacted. It's already way more than that frequently. 95th percentile is a joke. The main College intersection is a real problem. As College Avenue, this is not a realistic traffic estimate. The pedestrian traffic that's figured doesn't take into account things like the high school traffic, the special events like the farmers market and music in the park and all of those things. The environmental impact analysis in June didn't take into account the conversion of Pageant Way from 2-way to 1-way. Currently, some of the College Avenue traffic goes down Pageant Way to reach Main Street. That wasn't taken into account in this, and that traffic will now have to go, when that's 1-way, will have to go down College Avenue. The parking requirements are really underestimated. With the number of units with 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom and figuring the number of cars, I figure that at least 80 vehicles plus visitors should be accommodated in this, and not the very small number. The other thing I'd like to point out in the parking estimate is that the basis of the analysis was on Riviera Apartments, which mistakenly were attributed with only 164 stalls. They have an extra parking lot that wasn't considered, which has an additional 50 parking spaces. And that's how they based their parking estimate in the environmental impact report. And I'll echo the comments on the tandem garages. Those are really not going to be real parking spaces because people will store things there, and people will be parking their cars outside the garages just to avoid being blocked to get out from the inner car. The noise impact is 10 dB over the recommended levels of noise exposure. And 10 dB is an enormous difference. That's not just a minor difference. That's 10 times the noise power. Furthermore, the land title information, apparently there was no 50-year land title available to the environmental impact report. And that's an awfully big risk to take if we don't really know who owns the land. Thank you.
Jack Benada.
Good evening. My name is Jack Van Ada. I live at 165 Euclid Avenue. I've commuted up and down College Avenue about 2 to 3 times a day for the past 35 years. I wanted to address this as far as the applicability of the project to the general plan, so I cherry-picked some of the statements out of the general plan. The first one I chose was, it said, Los Gatos is the oasis of calm. Los Gatos is truly a special place, and residents want to protect their community from the increasing development pressures of the region. Residents expect all new development to fit into the fabric of the community. In addition, the benefit of new development must be measured against the ability of the proposed development and its architectural design to harmonize with existing development while minimizing impacts on existing residential neighbors and infrastructure. Support of new development from surrounding residents and property owners will be a major consideration during any development review process. Preserving the small-town character of Los Gatos is a collection of related issues, including human scale of development, historic preservation, density, intensity, and population growth. That was section 1 of the general plan. I jumped to section 10, which was community design element. That's stated to promote and protect the physical and other distinctive qualities of residential neighborhoods, avoid abrupt changes in scale and density. New structures, remodels, landscapes, and hardscapes shall be designed to harmonize and blend with the scale and the rhythm of the neighborhood and natural features in the area. Building elements shall be in proportion with those. Consideration shall be given to the sitting homes for privacy, livability, protection of natural plant and wildlife habitats, and migration corridors. New structures within the historic area shall be designed to blend and harmonize with the neighborhood. The other day, as I walked the neighborhood, I ran into two neighbors at two different spots, one on College Avenue, who related to me that in addition to the 32 units that are proposed for Ditto's Lane, several of the houses along College Avenue have been rezoned to allow multiple family units in the houses. Same day, Kimball Avenue, I met a lady who said the same thing happened to them, that two of the houses had been rezoned from single-family residence to multiple family. This rezoning will also increase the din of life that was once a quiet neighborhood, now becoming overrun with cars, pedestrians, bicycles, traveling to the Novitiate Park and to our homes, and a few trucks, as you saw. Commissioners, this project is only exacerbating the loss of our oasis of calm. The College, Kimball, and Prospect neighborhoods are directly affected by this project, and we're looking to you to maintain that guiding principle by reducing it to a size that will fit the space and the neighborhood. Thank you.
Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I'm not a resident of the area, but I am concerned. I'm going to start by just saying that I had originally planned to do an actual visual presentation, but technology failed me, and I couldn't get it printed out. So leaving it out of the process tonight, the implications of approving a project that has outstanding issues such as access, property lines, easements, etc. I think that the real issue tonight, I'm going to back up because I wanted to say that, again, this isn't an issue of low-income housing versus market rate housing. This is an issue of housing. You know, I grew up in low-income housing, and I don't think it needs to be any different than any other kind of housing. The issue tonight is whether the site design and the architectural design appropriately balance the density and intensity of the site based on the general plan, the entire general plan's goals, not just the housing element, and it's just a draft element, and the intent of the PD overlay policy, which is, the intent is to use it for alternative uses and development more consistent with the site characteristics, to create optimal use of open space and to encourage good design. And for me, that means both site and architectural design. And to me, none of those items are met by this design. If I have time, I'll go into the history. I did, and I will hand in a long list of the history of this project chronologically, because I think it's very instructive. However, just to make sure I get through some of the more important things I want to say, I'm going to start with the staff report. The staff report and the environmental document indicates that the density range is from 5 to 12. It's not a given of 12. The density bonus is stated in the documents as allowed 100%. Actually, the documents read up to 100%. And I'm assuming that means because other considerations of the general plan need to be taken into consideration. The site, while it's 1.5 acres, actually has only 1 acre of developable land. The staff report indicates that the town's consulting architect recommended 7 different mitigations or minor changes to the project. However, they are only minor changes. In fact, gosh.
Ms. Cantona, finish that thought, and then I'll have to close you.
Okay. What I'm going to read is what the architect's report actually says, which isn't in your packet. The site is a difficult one to develop for multifamily housing. Access is limited to a single location at the most narrow part of the site, and the maximum site width is not sufficient to develop a layout that clusters of units, leaving the applicant with long rows of buildings as the only alternative to achieve the planned project density. The resulting plan has several concerns that cannot be fully avoided, and then he gives several recommendations. But I think the main point here is that he is saying, in my opinion, that the design doesn't suit the property, that it's been designed to meet the density rather than designed to meet the site and its constraints.
Thank you. And our last speaker tonight, Mary Lyle Rempel.
Hi, my name is Mary Lyle Rempel. I live at 291 Casitas Boulevard. I debated right up until this moment whether I should speak tonight because a picture certainly can take the place of 1,000 words, can't it? I am decided to speak because I'm not a neighbor, and I'm just very impressed by the thoughtfulness. I'm a low-income housing advocate, and I'm very impressed with the thoughtfulness and the thoroughness and the care with which these neighbors have responded. I don't think there's any question that the acquisition of this land by the town took place under very questionable procedures, and that has been brought up. I might mention that one of the reasons this site was favored by generations of council members and it's in the record, was because minimal neighborhood opposition was anticipated. But we have pretty articulate and concerned neighbors here, as one always does. I think that's a given. Neighbors care. I'd like to say something about the parking, or one thing about the density, which is that land use surveys in the 80s showed 32 units of residents on this property. That doesn't mean that that's biblically justified or anything, but historically the property has supported quite a number of units. As far as the height impact is concerned, I don't know how many of you have visited College Terrace and taken a look at the way those posts are set up now, but I did go up there to take a look, and it's rather shocking what the impact is on the neighbors. I'm not a neighbor, but it certainly made an impact on me. On the question of traffic, I wish the town would not be so wedded to asphalt and also to high school drivers. I think that I certainly don't think that I'm addressing the major traffic problem here. These pictures certainly made clear that what I'm talking about is only part of the problem. But I think if the off-site parking that was used that surrounds this area, there's about 50 units, I think 50 parking spaces available over at Forbes Mill area. The town and the high school have huge parking lots that are very crowded during the day. The towns is very crowded during the day, but some town employees are able to use those parking spaces. I think the planning department should survey the high school and the town to see whether there's interest in these these units, and consider getting off-site parking for those tenants. There are a lot of solutions to some of these problems, but it's clearly a very problematic site, and density is of the essence. Thank you.
Okay. And actually, I apologize, Mr. Johnson. I did find your card. I had tucked it behind agenda item 1 accidentally.
Joel, I hid that from you because Joel and I are such good friends. Joel and I are good friends. We know each other. Jackie and I know each other. Bud Lords know. We all know each other. I've been having a great deal of fun going through the town historic records. I would like to point out tonight that we've heard about the history of the project. We've heard about the views. We've heard about the problems with people on College Avenue. And we've heard about just dozens of things that are problems. And what really strikes me tonight, I have gone through the last 24 years of the history of this, And everything we heard tonight was exactly the same things the Planning Commission said to the last developer who came in front of you all. Every single concern that the citizens said were the exact same concerns previous Planning Commission said to the developer when he was proposing 8 units, which is really surprising to me. I think at one point he proposed something like 12 units with 40 parking spaces. Now we have, it's turned around completely backwards. Anyway, I've had a hard time getting a lot of documentation from Joel and responses, and I've talked to the town. And I think for the community good that possibly the communications, and I'm going to make this really short, that Joel and Bud Lord's, oh, by the way, Bud Lord's comments are on almost all of the things where they were rejecting the previous proposals. But I would really like to ask that maybe just to make life easier, and I don't have to bother Jackie and Joel so much, that we just CC the community, whoever wants, on the emails between the developer, the EIR people, I think that's GGC, and there's another person. And that's the only thing I ask, is that we all just have full communication so that we can all see what's going on with this, so that we don't have to go down to the town and ask for copies of these documentations, because it takes a lot of time for town staff and a lot of time for the community, and we all want open communication. Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay, so I'm going to close public testimony. We've all been taking notes. I've heard lots of scribbling. I'm going to ask for a 15-minute recess. At that time, staff and the applicant are going to put their heads together, and then afterwards we'll get some responses to some of the questions and concerns. After that presentation, commissioners, I'll open it up to questions for us. I'm sure we all have several, and so what I'd like to do is just break them up by subject, and then that way we can try and at least try and have some coherency. It's a very dense project. I know we have a lot of detailed questions, and so the more we can bulk those, I think the better will be for next meeting. Okay?
Excuse me, Chairperson, can I just ask, why is the applicant and staff getting together? Can't we all get together? I don't understand why we're having a closed session between staff and the applicant.
It's not a closed session. It's just they're the ones that have the answers to the questions we've all would like to hear. And so for efficiency, I'd like to make sure that all the questions and all the notes that have been taken, you guys put those together and you guys come up with a one response. And again, if we have more questions, and I'm sure we will, we'll get to those. Okay? So let's start with that and then come back in 15 minutes. Okay, let's come back, and Mr. Johnson, your point was taken. I hope you noticed that people met separately. I will ask staff to respond, and then afterwards, if there's any questions or issues you want to defer, let me know. And then afterwards, commissioners, if you have any questions, like I mentioned, I'd like to bulk them into groups, and so after staff gives the presentation, I'll talk about the different group headings. And of course, if there's any others that fall, we can go ahead and discuss those afterwards, okay?
Yeah. Just for the record, we were asked during the break for staff took notes of all the questions. Of course, they'll be part of the minutes, but we were asked to provide those to an individual so that they're available immediately. We'll make them available in the clerk's office at the normal copying charge, and they should be available tomorrow morning. And those will be the notes that staff took this evening about the questions and comments that were made by both the members of the public, and then if there are notes taken when Planning Commission asks questions or comments. I don't know that there are responses that anybody wrote, but if those were in writing, those will be made available. You can make that request at the clerk's office in the morning.
Okay.
We categorized the questions as best we could into different categories, and what we're going to do is different staff members will be responding to different aspects of the different categories that we came up with, and I'll start with Joel Paulson.
So the first topic we'll talk about is density, and actually we'll have the applicant speak to how the site and site constraints landed on the 32 units. There was a comment made about the staff report and the error of the up to 100% density bonus. That is accurate. I would note that if this was at a 100% density bonus, there could potentially be 35 units on the site. But with that, we'll look to the applicant to comment on the site planning and what led to the determination of the 32 units, and then we'll move on from there.
Hi, Keith Labus with KTGY Group. I think there's two different issues there. One is the bulk and mass of the project, and there's the density. First, I'll speak to the height of the buildings. Surrounding the site, I think to the west, you have the fourplex off of Dittos Lane, which is 2 levels over garages, similar to what we're proposing here. To the east, you have the townhomes. I'll say the southeasterly, they're 2-story townhomes, but the higher building is a whole level above us, so the height is similar. I would say there's the one building to the northeast, which is about 2.5.
Actually, if I could just I'm such a visual person. Is there a visual that you can provide and point to these as, is there some way we can put one on the overhead?
Okay, here we go. Take this over. So north is towards the Creek Trail here. The existing project here is 2 stories over parking. This existing townhouse building is 2 stories, but the first finished floor is approximately 12 feet above the proposed first finished floor of this building, so they cap out at about the same height. This townhome building here is 2 stories, slightly above our site. So that would be the, I'll say, least similar in height and mass. Across College Avenue, those homes are 2 and 3 stories above College Avenue. So in terms of massing, while the use may be different, it may be lower density, some of the height and massing there is the same. Now, with regard to density, I think that the constraints on the site are what are driving the current design with regard to the topo and the desire to maximize the open space and get as much parking as possible is what is driving the parking to be put under the building and tucked into the hillside. The building A, which is this building right here, is essentially the same height as the building that was there that was demolished, which in essence was a 3-story building that had a basement under 2 levels. So while the building might be longer, it was the same height. So as from a view standpoint from College Avenue, you'll have the same view looking over the top of the project.
And now we'll go to circulation and parking and those other issues which will be addressed.
Actually, as we go through each grouping, Commissioner Bourgeois?
Yeah, maybe I missed it, but I'm not sure I heard an answer to how we got to 32 units, which I believe was the original reason we asked them to come up. What was the density, how we got to that number. I don't think I heard that answer. So if maybe we could have you come back up and address through the site planning how you ended up on the number of 32 units. That was the original question from staff.
Oh, okay. It was based on a density study that we did that was originally when the property was brought to us by the developer, giving us, the desired parking count and the desired unit mix, And that's how we arrived there.
Commissioner Telesfor, you look like you have a question.
Now, you are the architect, the site architect, so you didn't actually decide on the density?
Correct.
Okay. So who could address that question?
I could address that question,
Okay.
yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
It was, well, originally, I'm sorry, I think we had some confusion. The original question seemed to focus more on design, so we addressed the design and how we designed the project. But there was really no magic number that get to this density. When we generally look at a project, we instruct our architect to do feasibility studies. We're a developer that develops infill, larger sites, smaller sites, podiums, slab on grade, two-story tuck-under product, various different product types. So from a schematic and feasibility standpoint, we looked at this project a number of different ways. In fact, there was one feasibility study that we looked at that was in excess of 40 units that was a podium-type product. Understanding that a podium-type product would not fit within the existing urban fabric of the neighborhood, we chose to go with a more suitable design, which we felt was the tuck-under townhome style. In light of the parking and our desire to meet the 1.8 ratio, to have ample parking for the one-bedrooms and two-bedrooms, we landed at the 32 units. The 32 units has given us an equal mix of 50-50, 50% one-bedroom and 50% two-bedrooms. So I guess when it comes down to it, 32 units from an operational standpoint was a number that worked very well for us, and we landed at that. It seemed to have fit well at the site with the parking and surrounding design and buildings in the area. I don't know if you're looking for more detail. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Erickson?
Just a follow-up question.
Yes.
So I would assume from that answer that the upper range that you analyzed was 40. Can you tell me what the lower range that you analyzed that led you to 32?
We didn't look at a lower range. The upper range of 40 was basically just a product type of podium versus the townhome style, the 32 units.
So am I to assume that your answer is 32 then?
Sure, yeah. Like I said, there was no, yeah.
Commissioner Bourgeois, but before that, can you just explain to me what is podium style?
Oh, sorry. The below-grade structure with parking underground with structure above.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
If I could just have a follow-up with staff on that. I'm just curious as to how that 32 number relates to the affordable housing overlay zone and the numbers that came out of the housing element, and whether that was above, below, right on target. I'm just curious how those two relate.
As this project came forward and as the housing element was moving forward, the 32 units was in as a project, so that's where we landed, and the 32 is what's in the housing element.
Based on this project
Correct.
having to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions specific to density? Okay. Mr. Paulson or Ms. Bailey?
We'll now move on to Fletcher Parson to discuss traffic and circulation.
So I believe the direct question was in reference to parking. Parking is purely a management issue. Am I correct? That's the question, parking, right?
Yeah, we're going to go to Fletcher, but first.
Sorry, I didn't hear the Fletcher part. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. I was going to talk real quickly just about not the on-site management. I'll defer back to Jonathan on that, but more the study that was prepared and the anomaly to it that has been brought up by several people through the evening. The parking study was originally done looking at a similar project in, apartment project at Town Terrace, Riviera Terrace, sorry. And the idea was, again, to look at a similar product, count the number of spaces, and in doing that, they came up to a certain conclusion, and they had missed a dirt parking lot across the street that was owned by the same, the owner of the apartment complex, and they were allowing tenants to park there. And so the parking consultant went back to that lot a couple nights, and they counted 25 cars each night and assumed that all of those cars were from the Riviera Terrace project. And so they went back and they combined the data with the previous data and still came up with a total, even when including that extra parking. You know, their initial parking tally came to 1.12 spaces per unit. And after including the extra 25 spaces that they counted, they got 1.33. Our project is proposed to be parked at 1.8. So the conclusion is still the same, even though they missed the 25 spaces on the initial round. Mr. Paulson, are there other parking issues I should be addressing?
Well, I think there's a couple things were brought up about the parking for guests and the town codes language of up to one parking space per visitor, and that the parking for visitors is not adequate. The project and the ultimately planning commission will have to make a finding that less than or more than one parking space for a visitor unit is appropriate. So assuming that the parking study, even with the increased numbers, is less of a per unit count, and that would also be adequate for visitors, then the Planning Commission will use that information. We've also provided some additional information in the staff report, one of a recent apartment complex that was converted to condominiums, and so they had 56 spaces for 56 units, and they increased the parking to, I believe, 92 units, and many of those were, in fact, tandem. They're not in garages, but they are tandem, some under carport, half under carport, half out of carport, and that was ultimately approved by the council. So there's other sites. I don't have a parking count for the penthouse apartments. There's 81 units there. I don't believe, and we can look at aerials to see how many parking, or if Mr. Moss wants to give us that information. Obviously, that is parked far less than 1.81 per unit. So there's other projects, both existing and that have recently gone through the process, that have A, used tandem parking, and B, had far less than the 2.5 maximum requirement, which would be the 1.5 per unit plus the one space per visitor. Additionally, in the parking study, there's an Institute of Traffic Engineers parking manual that lays out parking allocations for various product types, and I believe the apartments is 1.2 per unit, which is inclusive of visitors. Getting back to the apartments on Masal that were converted to condominiums, ultimately the council restricted parking to 2 spaces per 2-bedroom and 1 space per 1-bedroom, and they'll do a parking allocation plan, which will also deal with some of the management issues that Fletch deferred to Jonathan, but ultimately those issues will have to be worked out to make sure that the management of those spaces to deter people from using their garages as storage rather than for actual parking.
Commissioner Erickson?
Can I ask just a question of clarification? I thought I knew this before tonight, and I'm now not sure. So there are either 58 or 60 parking spaces, I'm trying to get the math right, on the site. So are there 58 that include 2 shuffle spaces, or 60 that include 2 shuffle spaces?
60 that include 2 shuffle spaces.
Okay.
Those are not parking spaces.
Right, okay, just to be,
Correct.
okay.
There's 58 parking spaces and additionally
and 2 shuffle spaces,
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Telesfor?
Could we review where those shuffle spaces are? There's only 2 of them, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And could we review where those are?
They'll put that up on the overhead.
Okay. What are
I will go ahead and answer that. The intent of the shuffle spaces is for people who are parked in tandem. So if you need to get the front car out, you have an opportunity in a location to move the rear car to while you're removing the front car and then pulling the other car back in. And so if you want to point out the shuffle spaces on the site,
Yeah, I don't think they're not actually designated. Two of the spaces shown on the site plan.
they're right under your finger. Yes.
Are the two shuffle spaces, and as was explained, those are for the use of people who have tandem spaces. They pull the back car out into that temporarily, pull the other car out, and then pull the other car in, so that the first car isn't left out in the drive aisle to block someone else.
And one last comment to parking is there was some requests for information on, why there aren't any loading spaces for FedEx, UPS, disabled vans that are outreach, for one example. We don't require that of any residential development, so that is not required for this proposed project.
And just clarification, Mr. Paulson, for Riviera Terrace and Bayview, they both use tandem parking?
Only Baytree is.
Only Baytree, I'm sorry.
Baytree is tandem parking.
And I could easily do this, but hopefully you know the answer. The streets around Baytree and Riviera, are they permitted, or are they on-site parking for those that live in that area?
Portions in the vicinity of Baytree are permit, because that's in the Almond Grove, and I believe some of those are permitted.
Okay.
The ones around Riviera Terrace, I don't think they have any permit. And so I know that there was a lot of conversation, and I don't know, and maybe Fletcher knows, whether or not there is controlled parking at Baytree. I don't believe there's any controlled parking at Riviera Terrace. And that was one of the issues for Baytree specifically, was on Masal. I don't believe there's any restricted parking on Masal, and that was one of the issues as far as overflow parking goes.
Thank you.
So,
Commissioner Telspar.
follow up to that, Mr. Paulson. So do we know if any of the residents that live at the Baytree use the street for street parking, or their guests do?
I can't
we can't
conclude
answer that.
for sure, but I can imagine that in front of there may be.
They would do that. So
Yes.
it's not really.
This is a public, it's a public
Right,
street.
so they may have the parking, but we can't control where they actually do park. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on circulation and parking? Okay. Mr. Paulson, ready?
I would also just like to say that some of the comments that we did hear as well, there's a lot of them echoed, as I think the speaker said, some of the comments that they made in their letters or written or verbal communications regarding the draft EIR, and so those will have additional clarification and more specific information relating to those topics when the response to comments is completed.
And just for clarification, on March 9th, the consultants that will come in, I know the traffic consultants will, are they the same as do we have parking consultants?
They did both the traffic and the parking study.
And they will both be?
Correct.
Or they will be present?
Yes, they will be
Okay.
here. As well as the noise consultant, biologist, obviously the environmental consultant, and I think one more, but we'll try to clarify who will be present in the staff report for the 3-9.
Okay. Commissioner Bourgeois?
Yeah, I think this question is best posed under the circulation heading. And, I did walk the site, and you walk Maple and Dittos, and you see all the trees that are slated for removal. It seems like the majority of the tree, I don't think there's any question it's going to change the character of that strip. So my question is, the improvements that need to happen for the road, are they independent of the density of the development? For example, is it because we have a certain size that we need to have the ability to get a certain size fire truck back there? Or is it if we had 4 units back there, would we still need to make the same road improvements? I'm just trying to understand what needs to happen there.
I'll defer to Fletcher Parsons.
2 units and above drives widening the road. That's the county's code.
Okay. Mr. Davis, I'd ask for you to submit that in writing. No, I understand. And if anyone, I just want to get it clear that there's one more public hearing, And a lot of the questions or comments that you may be itching to say, you can do so at that time. Also, I cannot stress how important it is to get the written comments in the record. And so factual errors you think that need to be addressed, I strongly advise you to submit those so that those could be included in our staff report. So, to the staff, and those get submitted to us as part of our staff report. Okay, any comments that you have, I'm going to send them to Mr. Paulson. He's our point person. Okay.
If he doesn't respond, what do you do?
Okay. Now, Fletcher, was there anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, just in quick response to that, existing situation is allowed to sit, but as soon as you demo a building and build a new one, you're required to bring it up to the current code. It's just a standard practice.
Mr. Wu,
well, this is important because we're not going to get comment on this on March 9th. Are we going to be able to see the traffic impact report done by the consultant for the developer prior to March 9th?
all the information that the commissioners will have before us as we begin our deliberations will be sent to us on March 4th, the Friday before the hearing. And everyone who will have access to this on March 4th. And that's when, this is standard practice, this is when. Now, this project is unique because it's so dense. We've had the opportunity to have tonight the study session to begin studying it. We've also had the draft environmental impact report before us, and we listened to public comments on that. And as we mentioned, we don't have those responses yet. Those will come to us March 4th. This is a long process, and we've been utilizing all these weeks to gather all this information and study. I understand there's a lot of concerns, a lot of questions. We have those as well. But what we're trying to use this study session tonight to get to those. And what we don't have will be addressed before the 9th, hopefully by the 4th. Okay. Now, Mr. Paulson, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the entire traffic study is not in the draft EIR. Portions of it are. All of the documents referenced in the EIR talk about where they're located. We have the complete traffic study in the Community Development Department. We've had it since it's been completed. Anyone who wishes to get a copy of that, we can, make copies for those people. And I will also try to get a PDF version of it so that it can be emailed.
And are these available on the web, online?
The draft EIR is, the traffic report currently isn't. If we get a PDF version of that, we will put that on the web.
Okay, thank you.
So just for reference, this is the traffic study that was completed, has all of the data. I think one of the public commenters spoke about in relation to all the traffic movements, and Fletcher would know more about what's actually in here. There's a lot of stuff that... Yes, that was a comment, and that was specifically done when school was in session.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions on circulation and parking? Okay, Ms. Bailey, should we move on to development?
I'd like to add for the record, though, that there is one planning commission hearing left on this, but then there'll also be a council hearing. So there will actually be 2 more public hearings on this item, not one. Development issues, I believe those were mostly done by the applicant already, that dealt with the mass and scale. In terms of fire, that is handled through the EIR response to comments regarding fire access to the development, where there's some concern that this development would hinder access to College Avenue if there was a fire, or excuse me, College Terrace. In terms of access, before I turn it over to Mr. Parsons regarding the trail and construction impacts, there was a comment that there are no plans to implement the mitigation measures. That is common through the EIR process. They are implementation measures, and those are actually conditions of approval for the project. And the implementation measures identify when those measures will need to be implemented. Those are either prior to issuance of building permit, during construction, or prior to final occupancy. So those measures will be implemented at the time they are required. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Parsons.
One of the comments that I saw through the EIR, written comments, was that plans were not available for the public portion of this, the widening the roadway to the project. And the plans are available, and anybody who's interested in seeing them can contact me after the meeting, and I will make them available. They're available through the planning department in the file. They're open. There's no secret.
Access to Main Street is not even known right now. Did you figure out, Mr. Paulson?
As is stated in the staff report, we're currently working on options for that, and as stated in the staff report as well, that they will be available prior to the 3/9 hearing.
The real answer is no.
Commissioners, do you have any questions before we move on to development issues or fire? Okay. Mr. Parsons, were you going to talk about access?
Yeah.
Okay.
The drawings for the road widening are available. I can put them on the overhead if that suits people. And I can do that as well. They're available. Contact me afterwards, and I can do that. So these are the drawings starting down at Main Street. It's right now the drawings are showing 3 parallel parking spaces. There's currently 5 diagonal spaces there today. We're working on a drawing to address putting in 7 parking spaces there and delineating what we've been talking about, but hasn't been put into a picture yet. But really this area here is where we want to create a gateway off the roadway for pedestrians, dogs, bikes, everybody to congregate, and put some bollards to separate the roadway from the pedestrian congregation area, and possibly separate it by differentiating a type of pavement, but then putting in 7 parking spaces here, and then continuing on with the design as it's shown, with widening to 20 feet from here all the way down to the project. And there's retaining wall required to do that, and tree removal, and the plans delineate the trees. The trees are marked right now for which ones are being removed. The retaining wall proposed is a pier and lagging, so they'd be drilling and setting steel I-beams in concrete and then putting wood lagging down and then backfilling behind it. It's the method that has the least impact on trees and tree roots, because we're not cutting a continuous trench along the wall footing. And it continues on down in front of Mr. Davis's property, and then here is the project. So that's, there is no sidewalk. There's proposed to be downlighting, but people, just like a driveway, they would walk down the street.
Is that going to be a public street?
Public.
So that's publicly maintained, everything?
Mr. Parsons?
Sorry.
We need to have this on the record, and so all these off-site conversations are fine for those in here, but for those that are following it on TV and for those that are following it actually on the record, we need to have this conversation official. And so I'm going to stress it again. I understand frustration levels are high, but we need to do this. This process has to be correct. Otherwise, my attorney to my right is going to be very mad at me afterwards, okay? So if you have comments, please, I urge you, save them for the next hearing, send them in writing, but I have to do this the right way, okay? Now, Mr. Parsons, if you'd like to repeat that and then answer it.
Yes. There were a couple questions. One is, where is the sidewalk? And the answer is, there is no sidewalk. Lighting will be provided along, downlighting provided along the entire route, and pedestrians will walk in the roadway, like in a normal driveway. The other question was whether the road is going to be public, and it's yet to be negotiated, but the intent is to make it public under public maintenance.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Commissioner Bourgeois?
I have a question about trail access. There's that existing old maintenance road that drops down from the project to the trail. I think there's a gate down there. Is there any consideration about having an alternate trail access and maybe using some of the community open space on site as maybe a safer staging area than up at the corner?
There hasn't been talk about that. I know that other people are in control of that. It's a water district area, and it's not really a...
And actually, I'll jump in here. We actually plan to speak with the Water District to see if there's some opportunities to remove that gate, because currently it's locked. There may be an opportunity to do something similar to what may be proposed down there where it's bollards, so they can still pull the bollards out for maintenance access. However, pedestrians from the project or the fourplex or Moss, we're not planning to change the available access to the trail from near Main Street, but this may be a potential additional opportunity that we will explore.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, Mr. Paulson and Ms. Bailey, we're at circulation and traffic.
I can add one more regarding, there was a comment on how the access will be required, that the EIR document was vague on that. Just for the record, that is not a land use issue as part of the Planning Commission approval process or review process. That is handled by the Town Council and the Redevelopment Agency.
And I do have a question. I guess most likely the traffic engineers, you're going to defer to them, but they'll be here to articulate how they chose, what days, what times they chose to do their traffic studies at?
Fletcher may be able to add some input, but yes, they will be available to answer that question.
Okay. And there was a comment about future changes to roads. The specific one was Pageant Way and the one-way traffic. Does the traffic study anticipate changes that we anticipate based on library or future developments up within the queue?
It does, but to clarify the Pageant Way issue, it's just during construction of the library. It will revert to its normal pattern when the library construction is complete.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay. Ms. Bailey?
The noise issues, that those comments were raised during the EIR public comment period, so that will be addressed at that point. And let me discuss with Joel, Mr. Paulson, to see if we have any other issues under the other category.
And real quick, do we have a noise consultant? Is that part of environmental review?
That's part of the environmental review, and
okay.
So they will be available on the March 9th meeting
okay,
as well.
Thank you.
So Fletcher may be able to answer this a little bit, but there was a question about the survey. The town conducted a survey and found discrepancies from what was done, which is what some of the speakers spoke about. And Fletcher has been dealing with the property line issue on that. So I'm going to defer if you have any additional comments on that.
The survey shown on the drawings is based on a recent survey that has been quite extensive. The surveyor has found discrepancies along the way and resolved them as he went. There's a lot of anecdotal stories along the way that I don't think we need to go into, but right now Mr. Davis is having a surveyor review it, and we feel like a lot of work went into the survey, and that it's a good, solid, accurate survey. It's a licensed land surveyor. He does a lot of work in town and knows the area well. And the areas of discrepancy, one of them is along the College Terrace boundary, and the discrepancy found there from the fence line. It's hard to say where the boundary really was. I know that one of the speakers had thought it was, I believe, 19 feet off of her building. We don't find any record from the construction drawings that show it being that, but the fence line that's there's a discrepancy of up to 4 feet on the fence line. And we know that buildings were built, historic buildings. One of the buildings that's still standing was built right up to the fence line, and so it's been there a long time. And so I think that a lot of people were making judgments about that because physical improvements were built there and it was never checked. And so as we were going through some of the mapping exercises, we did check that, and about 4 feet. And then over on Mr. Davis's side, he's got some issues with some of our findings there. We found that we believe that a property line actually is like an inch off of his building, and he has a upper deck that overhangs into town property, and that's why we're going through a process with him to have him peer review the town's topo. So it's one that we've done a lot of work on, but we're also going through kind of a check and a review of it.
Any questions?
I'll go ahead and offer one additional comment. Is the speaker was right when she said we only pulled out housing element, existing and draft housing element policies, goals, and action items, or implementation measures, as they used to be known as. We'll also prepare a similar document going through the general plan and looking at general plan goals, policies, and actions of the adopted general plan for this project as well, and provide that in the staff report.
Commissioners, any questions? I do have a question. Hopefully we won't get to it, but on the 9th, if there are discrepancies that remain versus these property lines or title questions, how do those get addressed?
When the Planning Commission considers the project on the 9th, they will be considering the land use issues. And one of the land use issues that the Commission can consider and condition that night has to do with access to the project. It will be up to the Town Council to then determine whether they can obtain the access, move forward, or whatever other options may be available to them. But for the land use purpose for the project before the Planning Commission is you can consider access, condition it to be consistent with the town's standards as our Mr. Parsons indicated, but it is the council's purview to determine whether that access can be obtained.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay.
Can I just ask, does access include the title question? Is that part of what you were saying?
It does not. It just is land use would be that there is adequate access that meets the town requirements for ingress and egress for a project.
At what point would the title question, if there is a question, be brought up and resolved?
I'll let Fletcher speak to the property ownership issue. The property ownership is not in question. What is in question, and this was one of the draft EIR comments as well that will be addressed in the response to comments. The 50-year chain of title relates back to, I believe, the Phase 1 report that was prepared for the project, and it cited that a 50-year chain of title was not available. Property ownership is not in question for the site. And defer to Fletch if he has any additional information, or if I...
The Phase 1 was merely requesting the long chain of title because it would help them determine what the previous uses of the land were so that they could look at, so they could do the Phase 1.
Okay, Commissioners, any other questions that you may have? I've gone through my big groupings with my notes, but are there any free-flowing questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I have one kind of bigger picture question and then one process question. Given the fact that when we have BMP projects come before us, we typically make a pretty big deal about having them integrated with market rate units and having BMPs be indistinguishable and spread and not concentrated in one area. And so I would just like staff to come, because I know we went through the housing element and this development of the affordable housing overlay zones. And so I think it would be important just to get on the record why that's important, and why this concentration of below market rate units at this site is a good thing or is desirable when everything we've directed other applicants to do is to not concentrate them. So I would just like to have staff the opportunity to address that.
We'll go back through, as I think you were on the General Plan Committee as we went through, aware of your comments. That is completely accurate. Obviously, the town created these affordable housing overlay zones specifically for affordable housing, and they are spread throughout town where these concentrated projects, to use what you're looking at, those sites are intended to be used specifically for affordable only. And it's challenging for a developer, whether for-profit or non-profit, to do an integrated project of market rate units and affordable units and make that work with the financing issues and that revolve around those specific tax credits that they may not be able to achieve. So that's the mechanism the town looked at when we went through the housing element update, was to use this affordable housing overlay zone in an attempt to show our proposed compliance with the RHNA numbers and the affordable numbers that the town is proposed to produce over the life cycle of the current housing element, draft housing element.
I would also like to add that there are affordable housing developments throughout the town that aren't integrated with market rate units, so this isn't a unique concept.
And Commissioner Bourgeois, you had a process question as well?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand what we're doing at the next meeting. And so since the town council meeting has already been scheduled, typically when we see something, perhaps it's a little more open-ended, and there's a chance for us to, I'm not trying to be pre-decisional whether we're going to approve, deny, or recommend changes, but there doesn't seem to be that middle option of recommending changes because the town councils are. So can we wrap that into what is our range of options, because it's already scheduled for town council after us. So I just want to understand that.
The staff assumes that the Planning Commission will place recommendations on as this move forward. Their decision is, in fact, a recommendation. So, recommendations, obviously, the council will get all the records from, here to then as far as the verbatim minutes for each of the meetings. The formal recommendation can include modifications to the proposed project, additional performance standards, pretty wide open, as you've done on other projects as well. When you forward the recommendation, and ultimately the council will determine whether or not they want to include those recommendations in the ultimate decision of the project, or remand it, or provide additional information or justification as to why they don't agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. But yes, we imagine that you will add recommendations to the proposed project for all of the various issues that have been raised throughout the process.
Commissioner Jensen and then Commissioner Erickson.
I just want to clarify, and Commissioner Bourgeois corrects me if I'm wrong about his question, but I think what he's asking is, oftentimes, like we did with the project on Jared Lane, we said go back and come back to us. So it seems by the pre-scheduling of the town council meeting that that option is being taken away. And I know that when we do recommendations, we could still do that, for different things where, like, whatever it may be. I'll just use Peytos as an example, or the wine bar. We would make a recommendation to the town council. Usually we still have the option of saying, we have a middle option of saying, this could be better, go back and give us another proposal.
So projects such as the Jared Lane, the Planning Commission is the deciding body. So that would not be a project that would generally be heard by the town council unless it is appealed by a party. So when you make your recommendations for the developer to go back and make the changes, that's to come back to you as the deciding body for that project. As you recall, for this project, both for the land use issues as well as for the redevelopment agency, the town council and the town council sitting as the redevelopment agency is the final body, and you folks as planning commissioners, your task is to make the recommendations regarding either approval, denial, or modifications, or any other combination thereof, and pass it to town council. And it's then town council, and also sitting as the redevelopment agency, to make the determination, to hear the matter, to consider all the items, and then, as Mr. Paulson indicated, either make a decision, remand it back to the Planning Commission for further consideration. And as you recall, town council's recently done that on like the Union Avenue project that was passed with recommendations, and through the appeal process that's been passed back to you folks. So that's no different, your range of options, than you would normally have on any other project. Commissioner Erickson and then Commissioner Telesford and then Commissioner Ogle.
Can I ask the town attorney a question about that? So my assumption, so in other situations, unless I'm misunderstanding what we've done in the past, when the decision rests with the town council, however, we could continue an item if we wanted additional analysis or additional kind of things done, because typically, so something that had an alcohol beverage policy thing where the decision isn't resident with the jurisdiction, doesn't rest here, so we're making a recommendation, but there typically is no pre-scheduled meeting of the town council, so that would allow this body to be able to continue an item if they had some. So is there a presumption in this case that we wouldn't be able to continue an item beyond March 9th?
There is no presumption. That will still be an option that the Planning Commission, in their sole discretion, could exercise at the hearing on the 9th. The purpose of setting the hearing is there are state law requirements, and specifically under redevelopment law, that require a certain type of notice to be published, different than the typical 10-day public hearing for most land use items, in anticipation that this commission may take action on the 9th if they decide. Then we wanted to at least have a date in play so that the appropriate notices could be published and move the project along. In the event that the commission does not make a decision on the 9th and asks for the matter to be continued, then the hearing that's proposed for April 4th would then be delayed accordingly. Commissioner Telesford, did you still have a question?
I do. It's not a process question. It's actually a bigger picture question. Is yours?
Commissioner Ogle, was it
process?
possible?
My question was answered, thank you.
Okay, so Commissioner Telesford, what's your question?
Okay, I should have asked this earlier. I'm not sure. This would, I guess, fall under land use. But the focus of this affordable housing project is, as I understand, is for hopefully town workers, senior citizens, young families, or young couples starting out, and hopefully teachers and firemen and all of that. But I wanted to know how this will work. How does that get managed? How will that be insured? This would not fall under BMP program, I don't believe, or does it?
These are BMPs. So one of the things that will go forward and will be discussed at the Planning Commission next meeting is, obviously, Rome has done these types of projects in the past. They have their selection criteria. The town has its own unique selection criteria, which gives points based on various topics, whether you currently live in town, whether you currently work in town, if you're a senior citizen. And so, it's kind of a two-tier potential process that the council will ultimately decide whether we're going to kind of merge and use both the town's BMP selection criteria, which would put, more of the workforce housing element. People who currently work in town are going to get more points than someone who doesn't work in town or live in town, so they may rise to the top of that for existing, I'll use service workers in town currently. So those people would get more points. So the town council will ultimately decide how that selection process will be determined. But staff's anticipating that there'll be some strong consideration for using our existing BMP selection criteria.
Okay, thank you.
What is BMP?
And just for clarification, on our below market price program, that is not our jurisdiction, correct? That does the criteria of who gets selected to live in these apartments, is that our purview on the 9th, or is that something that the council will be reviewing?
The council will, but we'll ask for a recommendation from the planning
So that is
commission.
information we'll be getting?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Jensen.
This is actually a process comment and question. It's my understanding that we are going to start the March 9th meeting at a different hour, at 6 p.m. Is that correct?
That is
I just
correct.
want to make sure everybody knows that.
Yeah, that is
6
correct.
p.m.
There is currently one item prior to the proposed scheduled public hearing for the Planning Commission on this item.
Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and your patience. I assume we will all see you back here on the 9th. Remember, it starts at 6 p.m. Hopefully, all staff reports will be available to us on the 4th. And I did hear Mr. Parsons and Mr. Paulson say that they will have some information available tomorrow. Correct? The notes that we have.
The notes that staff took regarding the questions that were asked tonight will be available in the clerk's office at whatever the per-page copying charge is that the town charges. And Mr. Paulson and Mr. Parsons both indicated that they would try to obtain PDF versions of both the Ditto's Lane roadway improvements and the traffic study, and either make it available for individuals or certainly post it on the town website for the project as soon as it can be obtained. So if you are interested in obtaining copies, please notify Mr. Paulson or Mr. Parsons that you want to be notified when those are available.
Okay, and again, I want to stress that public comments are available until, Mr. Paulson, when are you accepting, when do you cut off written comments?
Well, I mean, there's two cutoffs. One is the packet goes out on
the 4th.
Friday, March 4th. So anything received generally up until the end of business on Thursday is included. Anything received after that will either be in the form of an addendum or a desk item.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Sure.